I could have. Probably should have. Oh my God, it's time for Midnight Metal. Oh, yeah.
For respect.
My name is Viviana Nieves. What's yours?
The same way it is forbidden for a man to touch any woman other than one's wife.
Moshe the children.
I had a dream.
This way. I like it like that.
Hashem told you to dance in a tango contest?
A Gentile dancing teacher wants to tango with you?
Dance.
In a TV contest?
No, you're a lunatic.
She's a bad mother.
You might find there's no need to touch this woman in tango.
How can I achieve my goal without sacrificing my sacred beliefs?
We're gonna kick him right out of the community.
I got big problems.
Big problems can be such big fun.
How do we convince people that a young, pretty shiksa dancing partner is just a young, pretty shiksa dancing partner?
She should be dressing very modestly. You cannot even touch her hair. You cannot even have eye contact with her. If I understand the communication from that dance tango, it's impossible. Why are you hoping that he sins?
We've got work to do.
We should be praying that he doesn't sin.
I never had a best friend before.
Who is that?
You know what shameless self-promotion is? It's fucking metal! Fucking metal! Ha ha ha! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these, the 28 known galaxies. I am your host of Midnight Fucking Metal, episode number 33. It's as old as Jesus Christ was when he was crucified. Midnight Metal, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what? We've got a great show for you tonight. I'm just going to bring on my co-host. By the way, I am Robert Meyer Burnett, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your master of fun and wonder, your pharaoh of physical media, your whatever, your existential Mr. Rogers. Who cares? The fact is, it's Midnight Metal 33, and I've got Tom from Midnight's Edge, and I've got your favorite lady, my favorite lady, everyone's favorite lady, bringing them on their fucking metal. Let me ask you, are you both feeling fucking metal tonight?
Yes.
Metal.
Yes.
Fuck yeah. That's what I'm talking about. You know what else is metal? Tango Shalom, an indie spiritual Jewish family dance comedy fable. That's metal. Opening in theaters the beginning of September, on VOD everywhere, October 29th. Oh, by the way, I might have produced it. I might have edited the film. I was the VFX supervisor and the post-production supervisor. And guess what? That's fucking metal. I'm going to give myself a silver sphere. So there you go. How metal are we tonight? We're very metal, aren't we?
Incredibly metal. This is just so fantastic, Robert. Just off the charts metal, insanely metal.
You know who else is metal? Fucking Johnny Five. He's alive. He's on Tom's shirt. Tom is representing with the AI, which is always made of metal. Made of metal. So let's just. I was gonna.
I have that box set too. Yeah.
I had to stop. I was gonna talk about movie theaters, but Tom, since you're wearing the shirt, I need to know about the first time you ever saw Short Circuit, because that's got to be metal. What was? I mean, do you dream of Johnny Five still?
I don't know about dream of him, but the first time I saw it would have been on VHS back in '86 or '7 when it first came out. My dad actually worked for like a grocery, not a grocery store chain, but like a gas station chain, and they'd rent movies, so they would get them like a week or two early, and that's kind of my, he'd bring home a stack of movies every week. And they would still be in plastic and stuff. So it was years before I realized when you'd rent a movie, you'd get it in a plastic case. I was like, what the hell is this? First time I ever rented a movie like that.
Wow.
So yeah, I just remember him bringing it home with a bunch of other movies. And I don't even know if I ever remember seeing a preview for it ahead of time. My dad's just like, here, watch this. It's like E.T. And I watched it and I fell in love with it. It was great. And I even love the second film quite a bit. I'm glad I got the second Blu-ray that just came out here recently too from who was it that did it? 88 Films or something like that.
Oh, did they do it? 88 Films.
It was either them or somebody else. But yeah, it's a really nice little set they put together. So
I'm a big fan. 88 Films. They put out Two Moon Junction. When I was in college, if you wanted to get laid, the movie you showed your lady friend was Two Moon Junction, or by the way, don't know why, The Lost Boys. The Lost Boys and Two Moon Junction were the movies that would get college girls in the mood. This was back circa, we're talking circa, 88,
Early
87, 88
right.
kind of thing.
Well, the Lost Boys had so many hot boys in it. I'm not
know.
surprised that would get the juices flowing.
Billy Wirth with his long hair and his chest. I mean, back then I taught, I helped teach aerobics. So, I was in good shape too. Just saying.
I'm pretty sure Lost Boys still works, but anyway.
Yes,
it does work.
Does.
Because I'll cry, little sister.
I still believe.
I mean, come on, that guy. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're straight or gay. You get laid if you watch The Lost Boys. I'm telling you. It works for everyone. And if you have, mixed company over, it's even better. Just saying.
My phone and all.
So, anyway, VHS. So that kind of leads into the topic I wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
By the way, first of all, let me just say, a lot of people last weekend said our Friday show, we had Andre on. Our Friday show was decidedly unmetal because we started talking about truth. Listen, having interesting intellectual discussions is fucking metal. It's fucking metal. We don't just have to talk about rock and roll or something like that. Sometimes it's important to discuss things that, matter. Now might not be one of those times. But anyway, I just think that there's an article, Barry Diller has been in the news. Barry Diller used to run Fox. He used to run Disney, of course, or pardon me, he ran Paramount and Disney. He was there when Star Trek The Motion Picture was made. He married, even though he's gay, he married Diane von Furstenberg, so they're the best of friends. And him and Diane built this floating park that's in New York. It's pretty cool. I haven't actually been there, but I hopefully will go there when we have the premiere of Tango Shalom at Lincoln Center, which might happen, believe it or not. And we'll be there.
Definitely.
You will be there. More on that later. We'll talk about that, but it could happen. Lincoln Center. My God. For this little movie, insane. Anyway, so Barry Diller, one of the, in the 80s, he was one of the most baller executives in Hollywood. I mean, he was one of the most important people, and now because he's built this, he's a philanthropist now, and he's making New York a better place to live, and he built this park, so he's been in the news a lot. In the Hollywood Reporter today, Barry Diller thinks that only 10% of movie theaters will remain in the next few years. So I'm going to read this quick article. Barry Diller doesn't think the movie business is dead, as a recent NPR story declared, but the traditional movie-going experience will continue to transform, resulting in a loss of about 90% of movie theaters worldwide. Quote, because of streaming, because of the pandemic, because of the enormous production of long-form content, the word movies, what we think of as a movie, is evolving and no longer means what it did just a couple of years ago pre-pandemic. Diller said in an interview on KCRW's The Business, hosted by the Hollywood Reporter's Kim Masters. And with that evolution, Diller noted, will come the, quote, inevitable closure of movie theaters with an estimated 10% remaining worldwide. Quote, I don't think there'll be anywhere near as many as there are now. I do think that they're appropriate for big productions where you need sound and lights and all that extra, where you need a communal experience, he said. But I think for the normal everything else, I don't think you're going to be going to the theaters. For traditionalists balking at the changes, the former Paramount Pictures and 20th Century Fox chief executive, who now leads IAC, said streaming isn't all to blame. Instead, major companies have adjusted their strategies to focus too much on projects that can be made into sequels and franchises equipped with predetermined marketing budgets and merchandise. Diller said, it's a viable strategy, he says. Certainly it was for Disney, but that strategy became pervasive and forced out any other strategy, i.e. the development of a number of projects, Diller said. Those changes, coupled with the pandemic and the rise of streaming, have resulted in what Diller described as the, oh my God, irrelevance of Hollywood, and the sense that nothing lasts very long. He also zeroed in on Disney as an example of how the movie-making business has changed to give those on the distribution or business side more power in determining where a movie goes rather than the studios that are creating the film. Quote, when you think about that, that is a crazy idea, Diller said. You actually make a movie and you don't know where it's going. Is it going to go to streaming? Is it going to go to direct to consumer? Is it going to go to a theater? Or is it just going to go, to Sam's Club? Unquote. So that's what Barry Diller had to say. Now, I put it to the two of you. Movies have been a big part of your lives. Do you think that in 10 years, 90% of movie theaters are going to go away? Is the communal experience going to go away? Like, movies to me were the most important thing in my life, and they have been for a long time. Now, it's what movies are. It's the stories they tell. It's the reflection of humanity. To me, it was the art form of the 20th century. It was all the other art forms combined with the added benefit of technology, because it's not something that could have happened in the 1700s or the 1600s or the 1500s. We needed, electricity, and we needed photochemical film. So it truly was, and it began in the late 19th century, but it came of age in the 20th century. We got sound in the late 1920s. We got widescreen in the 50s, to compete with television. And then we got amazing special effects technology beginning, with Star Wars. And then, of course, in the early 80s, computer technology really started to permeate or trickle in. But by 1993 in Jurassic Park, CGI writ large on the big screen created photorealistic dinosaurs. So as technologies increased, movie-going increased. And in 2019... Avengers Endgame became the biggest grossing film of all time. So how can Barry Diller say just because of pandemic it hasn't gotten rid of our love of stories or movies? What the fuck, man? I don't think Barry Diller's very metal here, even though he's got a chrome dome, which could be metal. I don't know. But what do you guys think? I put it to you. Are movie theaters doomed?
It's something to think about, because in our lifetime, we've witnessed such an upheaval of the movie theater in general. I remember there was a time where when a movie first came out, whether it was good or bad, like the movies would sell out on certain nights. And, people would be lined up to go see the movies. And there would be all sorts of promotions and advantages. And frankly speaking, the majority of these films are meant to be seen in a movie theater, and while you can watch it on another type of screen, you're not going to get the same experience. So, as much as I hate to say it, and as much as I'm in denial about it, I mean, even the theater where I live has been closed several times and reopened due to hardships. And we're seeing, things like that. We're seeing huge conglomerates of movie theaters and corporations that own them struggling financially. and things that seem to be written in stone just are not the norm anymore. I mean, I think that if they had some fierce negotiators who could ensure that, you know, these screens could stay open, that's fine. But for the smaller theaters, you know, I'm concerned about them. And I'm not talking about the ones that are necessarily, you know, places like the Angelica Film Center in New York or anything like that, that has a strong connection to cinema and the art. I'm talking about, you know, the rest of the theaters out there, like the one near me that has 6 screens, and they're not affiliated. They're not an art house. You know, they're struggling to stay alive. And, you know, I really, my heart goes out to these owners who have put so much on the line to keep, you know, this dream alive of the movies. But I think we're going to see dramatic changes. And I think that the recovery process will be long. But I'm not sure whether it'll be 10%. I truly don't know whether that's a fair assessment, even though he's probably more than qualified to make that kind of a suggestion. But
right.
I think that what we're seeing right now is maybe about a quarter of theaters that, you know, a reduction of 25% at least. Here, even in New York, that I'm noticing in an area where I live, where there's a bunch of theaters. There's a lot of theaters where I live, but because they just are not able to cope with the dramatic changes, and they're dramatic. You know, it was already complicated before, you know, this entire thing affected the world. It was already complicated before that. And then when you add that factor in, and you know, just not having that ability to take your business to where you need to go, you know, it's another factor that can't be anticipated. I mean, what happens if, for example, where I live, we had a very devastating storm that shut down our theater for 4 years. Now, no one could anticipate that.
What?
It was, yes, it was a natural disaster. And the only movie theater on this island that I live on was closed for 4 years. So no one could have predicted that. And it was, the economy wasn't bad. But it just happened to hit at a time and that was unexpected, and it shut it down. Now, that may be very atypical for the average theater, but, you know, if you can use that, the notion of, you know, are they going to be prepared for the next thing that will come? Because there probably will be things that might disrupt the movie business in the future, especially in movie theaters. So with the knowledge that there could be a disruption, I could see how, you know, maybe it would go from a 25% reduction to maybe 50.
Right.
You know, so we already know things are going to happen. You know, this isn't a perfect world. You know, we hope for the best, but we're expecting, you know, the unexpected. So, but for me, I think that people are still going to want to go to the theater, and they will still buy tickets. I mean, I've gone to the theater this week, and I think that people are going to have a desire to experience that because they want to share the experience with others. I mean, it is true that the movie is made to fit that screen in many cases, but the shared experience also is something that I hope theater goers want to maintain and still experience, because the movie is meant to be seen with others. And, you know, it gives deeper meaning to the movie in itself, as far as I'm concerned, whether I'm going with my mom or there are other strangers in the theater. So I'm hoping that it's not as dramatic as he says in the article. He mentions, in the article, he mentions that, you know, some retailers have become somewhat of a distraction, and that people are more concerned on, you know, spending money there. But, you know, honestly, you know, he also is a retailer as well, a major retailer with his, I believe he still owns QVC and HSN, which are home shopping networks where people are throwing money into as well. So, you know, there really isn't anybody immune from, let's say, contributing to a problem in regards to, you know, where is all the money that was going maybe to a theater now going to another source?
Okay, Tom, I've got to ask you this question. Obviously, you and I have an affinity for collecting physical media.
You're right.
We like that. Now, I would ask you, make a case for why movie theaters are still relevant. Why is the movie-going experience something that should be preserved? I would assume you believe that it is. Maybe you don't. And maybe, but I would be curious to hear you make a case, plea for the continuation, plea for the stay of execution of the movie theater.
Well, funnily enough, I got a lot of flack last year when I had put in one of our editorials that, or not editorials, but stories or whatever, that the studios are going to realize they need the theaters more than the theaters need them. And everybody called me, a fool, or called us a fool for saying that. And it's like, well, we'll see. And throughout the last year, unlike in certain areas like you're in, there are areas that you saw a spike in drive-ins open up.
Yeah.
Like my local theater, for instance, like you just said, had been closed. Yours had been closed down for years. This one had been closed down for years just because they've been trying to sell it along with the drive-in. And as soon as this stuff all happened, not only did the theater in town reopen, but so did the drive-in, and it's been open ever since, which I seen that more so than anything is that it started this whole thing. The theaters thought they were going to, cut the oxygen off of or the studios thought they were going to cut the oxygen from the theaters. And what they did is they just, caused the theaters to be desperate enough to find other means and measures and ways to become more relevant again. And in this instance, I've said, I get it when people are like, I don't want to go to the theater. There's noisy kids, there's sticky floors that cost too much, and this and that and the other. But I remind them all the time that all the things that people gripe about when it comes to theaters are the studio's fault for wanting 90% of the opening weekend box office all the time. That way, that's why they have to mark up the price on all the, popcorn and soda. That's why they can't afford enough kids to come in and clean up after in between. That's why they ain't got enough ushers to come in and boot, noisy patrons out. There's all these problems, but yet last year when there was nothing coming out, we saw movies like Halloween, the 1978 film, made more money last year basically than it did in its entire run originally. And Empire Strikes Back was also one of the top films of the year. All these films that got re-released played very, very well. And then at the beginning of this year, we saw things like Godzilla vs. Kong show that people do want to go see movies in the theater. Even though Black Widow was available and 2 million people sat at home and watched it, a ton of people still went to see it in the theater. And even though Disney tried to artificially make it look like the numbers were better than it was by adding the Disney Plus to it, I said that was kind of a detriment. If anything, they should have been, look what we did. We got a movie that made $80 million right now.
Right.
When theaters are for the most part, like Ahram said, in some areas still closed.
Yeah,
and then,
over 20% of the theaters in the United States are closed.
Exactly, and Fast and the Furious is the same thing. I think as long as there's stuff out there that people want to see, and maybe the studios just need to come up with something with the theaters, is something to kind of reinvigorate going to the cinema. And I know the next thing was Cameron was pushing for glass-free 3D, which that may be one of the next things in the next 10 years that will come about, but the technology isn't there yet. There's something else that needs to get the people into the theater. Maybe it's something like Dune. There's a lot of interest in that. I noticed that a lot of people are kind of more interested in checking that out than I think some of the people are giving the film credit for. Yeah.
Here's what's very funny to me. I've had people say to me, I just felt the trailer for Dune was meh, and we live in a very strange time where I think that, and I don't quite understand. I think it's up to studios to not just market movies, but to position what movies are in terms of our culture. And when I was growing up, and when I fell in love with film, going to a theater, when I would walk into a theater, I had a feeling. It was a buzz to walk in. And when I was a kid, the theaters felt like they were gigantic. I mean, and they were gigantic. In Seattle, we had per capita more movie theaters than any other city in the world. And Seattle was a great movie-going city. And there were these giant theaters, and all the theaters were like these big box giant theaters that I would go to. So to go to the movies, even to walk in, even the lobbies were huge. And when you would go in there, for me as a child, it was an event. It was a you walked into a movie theater, just even the idea of walking through the doors was exciting. And I know that maybe it was just me, but the whole experience of sitting down in a movie theater, the smell of the popcorn that permeated the lobby, and at first my mom would take me because I was a movie fanatic even as a kid, and your parents would have to take you. And then when I got a little older, my parents had to deal with me because every weekend I was going to movies, and my parents would always say, okay, if you find kids' parents to bring you home, we'll drive you one way. And so I was always scrambling on the phone, which means I would call like 4 or 5 kids, and even if their parents couldn't drive them, they still wanted to come to the movie. So and then if I ended up getting 5 or 6 kids, I would and I couldn't get a parent to do it, I'd have to like plead to my folks, and they knew that I would never shut up about it, so they would drive me both ways and my friends. So I'd get 6 kids, be 6 of us going to the movies, and it was a great time, but I was like the movie ringleader, because every weekend, and I was totally into it, and it was a special thing. And to me, growing up, it didn't matter what movie that I was seeing.
Right.
Any movie on a big screen made it better. Even if you're watching some low budget, I remember seeing one of my favorite low budget films of all time is a movie called Liquid Sky that came out in 1982, and it's a very low budget. Here's the plot of Liquid Sky. An alien spacecraft the size of a dinner plate lands on a ambiguously sexual punk rock model in the New York punk scene, played by Ann Carlisle, and she plays both the male and the female lead of the film. At one point they fuck each other. So this alien that's in this dinner plate-sized spacecraft feeds off the opiate produced by the human brain at the moment of orgasm. So as this punk rock model fucks people in her apartment, the alien shoots a glass or a crystalline shard into their brains, killing them. And so the model has no idea why this is happening, and she believes that she's killing people through her sexuality. And at the same time, there's a German UFO expert that's on the trail of the aliens, and it was directed by a Russian who, as he said at the time, he goes, I made a movie about what I believed New York was like while I still lived in Russia. So based on all the propaganda, and by the way, Vinegar Syndrome put Liquid Sky out. Now, if you watch it now, there's a lot of people would be like, what the fuck is this? But at the time, I was really into the low budget, like, give me Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer. That was, low budget, shot in the streets of New York in 16 millimeter, or Frank Henlotter's Basket Case. Like, I would watch, and the films that were coming out of the New York independent genre sphere were fucking insane. They were crazy, but to go see them, whether it was a Grindhouse version at midnight, or you would go to the Seattle International Film Festival, and if you could see Basket Case and Liquid Sky, then they were elevated because they were at the film festival. Even though it was Sleazy, what is that character from Star Wars? Sleazy Begano, the guy who's selling the death sticks or whatever, in Attack of the Clones. It was like that. But seeing those movies on a big screen, seeing Basket Case on a big screen was fucking awesome. I mean, it when you see Belial, it was great. And the violence and the just maniac on the big screen. Nowadays, that would never happen. You would never, and yet for me, when I was seeing these sleazy grindhouse, the sex and the violence and the fucking awesomeness, the metal of it all, was great, because when you're in a movie theater, you're not thinking about anything else. Literally, it's like a sensory deprivation tank for your imagination. Except your imagination, you're not alone with your thoughts like in altered states. You're actually seeing this movie, and that's all that is the reality of the universe at the time you're there. And I do think that there's something to be said for that, for us as human beings, going into a movie theater collectively with our fellow man. It's not like church. It's not like, or women or gentle beings, if you're not men or women, whatever. I don't mean to, leave anyone out. But I just am saying the collective humanity going into that room, and you forget everything, and you're all there together. People from all walks of life, every shape, size, color, creed, doesn't matter. You've all come to this place together. and you are sitting next to people. As I like to say, no one's a racist in a movie theater. Because who cares? The lights are down. Maybe there are people, but for the most part, we're all there together. And when the lights come down, we are all. How many times can you get all walks of humanity to shut the fuck up and sit down and just experience what is put in front of you? And nowadays, I don't think it's possible. But growing up, it was amazing because you never knew what was going to happen. And everybody who's sitting next to you, they didn't know what the fuck was going to happen anyway. But if they knew that there was some movie called Basket Case where someone's twin brother is like this misshapen head with arms, and there's a sex scene in that movie that you'll never forget. Let me tell you. And it's like we're all there together, like, oh my God, Belial's fucking her. Oh my God, it was awesome. Sorry,
what about
ahead.
the notion of, when you are experiencing the film with a group of people and it is a packed house, and it does change the experience of the film. And I love seeing exploitation films in packed houses.
They're the best.
I saw I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker in a packed house with a bunch of people who were like yelling at the screen. It was a ruckus, fun, crazy time where just you enjoyed it. It was meant for you to interact with others. I think that the director wanted you to interact with the person next to you during some of these exploitation films because, the entertainment gets you so roused up that, it's funny and it's not so much fun to watch that type of film by yourself. No. You're sitting there and you're like, oh, okay, that was funny, and you kind of like, hey, didn't you think, oh, wait, there's no one here.
Well, yeah, watching a movie is a communal experience in itself. I mean, yeah, it's cool sometimes to watch a movie by yourself. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of times you gauge the other person's reaction to things, or you want somebody to engage with after the film or during the film, or get somebody else's interpretation. And yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Not only that, going to the theater, going back to my point before is it's very difficult to find something nowadays that you can do for very cheap. And as much as we gripe about the cost of going to see a movie, let's be real. That's a cheap fucking date. And especially if you got a family, that's a cheap night out. Try going to a concert.
Oh yeah.
Or something special like that. You're never going to be able to, even a ball game anymore.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The prices on a ball game.
And like you said, Robert, that was our weekends too growing up. Our parents would dump us off at the movies. We'd go see a movie or two and they'd pick us up or we'd walk to wherever. And, that was what we did. You can't do that nowadays with kids. But, again, I think you're right. Like the idea of being able to do a lot of that has gone out the window. They need to up the ante a little bit. They need to make the experience a little bit more exclusive feeling. And I think the corporation coming in like the AMCs and all that kind of stuff and the multiplex syndrome that we had, that is what's going to kill the theater industry more than anything. And those are going to probably go away. But I hope the movie houses make a comeback. I feel like that, the article isn't wrong in what it's pointing out as far as like, yeah, there's a lot of these smaller features that are probably going to go straight to streaming. We can see that already, but I still don't think that's going to take away the whole theatrical experience, though.
And here, let me. Here's what, and I feel guilty about this myself. I have now bifurcated. Well, not even bifurcated, more than bifurcated, but even I have gotten to the point. I know that it's better to see any movie in a theater. Any movie. And yet in my mind, I have now been trained. I've trained myself, and I feel fucking guilty about this. There are movies I'm like, I'll wait for streaming. Like, I literally, based on subject matter or whatever, like I'll tell you something. Today, as an example, when I was younger, when a Friday the 13th movie would come out, I wanted to see that movie with a predominantly black audience. Why? Because a predominantly black audience, and I didn't understand this when I was in junior high and high school, a black audience would talk to the screen. Like there would be incessant commentary. I did not understand this until I went to college. All I knew is I loved it, especially for a Friday the 13th movie.
Right.
I was saying on John Campy's show this morning, the single greatest time I ever had in a movie theater ever was in Friday the 13th 3D. which came out in 1982. And I went to the Town Theater. I went to the downtown Seattle. Seattle was not exactly a hotbed of racial diversity in the early 80s. But if you would go on a Friday night to downtown Seattle, you would get a predominantly, let's call it urban, but I would say black audience. And I would make it a point, if a slasher movie opened, I wanted to see it with a black audience because the participatory nature of it. What I did not understand until college, and then I fucking got it, I was like, why is it black audiences talk back to the screen where white audiences don't? I didn't understand. When I was in college, I was studying I went to a Southern Baptist church. And I went to a Southern Baptist church, and there was, I swear to God, it blew the roof off. You want to feel spiritual? You go to a black church. And I realized the preacher who was really channeling the Lord, the whole fucking audience, the whole congregation was talking back to the preacher. It was call and repeat, and I realized, I'm like, oh my God. Because I'm a Jew, so I never went to church. But my best friend was Catholic, and I'd go to church with him. People just shut the fuck up. They just sat there. It was boring as fuck. It was liturgy. I mean, it was so like, oh my God. You go to a black church, man, you feel the spirit of the Lord. You want to fucking get up. My God. I mean, and everybody's, and I realized that's where it came from. It was church, man. You go to church, if you are a black audience and you go to a church, you're into it, man. You are calling. When your preacher tells you to say something, praise the Lord. You praise the goddamn Lord. So when you go to a movie like Friday the 13th 3D, the black audiences, man, it was like being in church. They were talking back to the screen. They were into it, man.
They're getting into it, exactly.
They were challenging. They were channeling the Holy Spirit of Jason fucking Voorhees, man. And I was there for it. I didn't understand that till I got to college. And like when I went to USC, which is on the border of South Central LA, my God. Go deep down into South Central and go best audiences in the fucking world. It was the best. But once I understood that, it was amazing. And I realized the only way I could get that, the reason I loved the Friday the 13th movies and other slasher movies was because of the black audiences that would have it no other way. They turned out. They were there opening night because they were fucking excited, man. It was like going to church. They might not have been seeing the Holy Spirit. They were there to see Jason fucking Voorhees, man. They were there to see the goddamn devil. And it was amazing. And I'm like, that was an incredible experience. And back then you get one Friday the 13th movie every year. So, and then you get The Burning and He Knows You're Alone and all the other horrible slasher. But I think about that time and I'm like, we don't have that anymore. You know, we don't even have exploitation movies never make it to the theater.
No.
All the horror is highbrow now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even make an exploitation movie. You know, that's misogynistic, or you can't do
whatever,
that.
Yeah, exactly. No, and to go off of your point right there, and what Arun was saying earlier too about the whole fun factor. You know, that's another thing about Friday the 13th. They were fun. They were fun films to the point where, and here's something that's metal because Tommy McLaughlin, who is in a metal band, who directed Friday the 13th Part 6, he literally put setups in his movie so the audience would call out the punchline. Like a prime example is when his ex-wife on screen gets stabbed in the head and you see because she's trying to offer Jason money and credit cards and he's like, fuck, I don't need that shit. And he just, and we're all laughing. And then you see the American Express card. He said, I put that inevitably in there because he knew somebody in the audience would go, don't he leave home without it? And everybody would start laughing. It was set up that way. He did it on purpose. He did it for fun. It was just that whole idea of I'm going to put you on this roller coaster ride from beginning to end. You're going to get into it and you're going to love it. And it's going to give you everything you want from it. It's almost like they're against doing that anymore. Like I remember talking to you about like certain things like the Avengers. It's like we get so bogged down in what these movies mean now. It's like the thrill we had going into the first Avengers film was like, holy fucking shit. I'm seeing Iron Man, the Hulk, Captain America, whoa, all on screen at the same time, and it wasn't, some fan film for once, right?
Dude, I gotta tell you, I mean, I went with Nikki Griffin, who's actually in the Drift, Tokyo Drift, and Derek Hughes, who works on he's on Legacies now, but a good friend of mine, and we're all there. We're all geeks. I sat in the Avengers, and I thought I was immune to this. I thought I was jaded, and I was watching the Avengers, and I'm like, I can't believe this movie exists. And it was in the trailer, but the shot where the camera rolls around where Iron Man lands, it's the entire Avengers in the middle of New York City fighting the Chitauri and all that. I was like, I think I might have turned to Nikki. I'm like, I can't fucking believe it. I'm like, oh my
How many nerds had nerdgasms at that moment?
I mean,
come on.
But what was so funny was, I'd been reading Marvel comics since I was a little kid. I'd watched animated shows. I'd owned Mego action figures in the 70s of these characters. And by the way, this was only 5 years after Iron Man came out.
Right. Right.
It's only 5 years. Actually, it's 4 years. 4 years after Iron Man came
2012,
out. Yeah. 2012, and Iron Man came out in 2008. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, this was different than Star Wars, because you hadn't seen it before. This was something we all knew what it was, and we grew up with the comics, and I'd read 100,000 Marvel comics. But to see it all, and that was the first time we'd saw Ruffalo's Hulk. We hadn't seen Ruffalo's Hulk. We'd seen Ed Norton's Hulk. And when they went and got him and all of it. And it was, I remember sitting there going, I couldn't even believe what I was watching. I couldn't even believe it existed. Even though of course I knew it did. I saw it being built up. And but sitting in that theater, I'm like, holy shit. And I can't imagine not having that experience again. I'm really hoping, like, to me, Dune, after hearing and to hear Zephyr Chan, the two of you last night, I mean, I had a Woody the whole time. I mean, I'm like, oh my God. And to see the trailer, I'm like, because that was the same thing. I read Dune when I was a kid, and all that we've seen, the Lynch version in '84, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be, because the technology didn't exist. And when I saw the trailer yesterday morning, I'm like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, it's so funny to read people like, I don't understand. That trailer was meh. It was so basic. I'm like, yeah, because they have to sell it to you, idiot. I mean, they're trying to sell it to you. You've never read the book. You don't know Dune. You haven't watched the Lynch movie. Like, I understand all these people going, oh my God, and you're wondering what it's all about. Well, I don't know. Go to Wikipedia and type in Dune. Just read the entry on, I don't know, the novel. Maybe you'll get it.
Yeah, and it's another argument for keeping, you have to see Dune in a theater, especially the new version of the film.
In IMAX. In IMAX. It was shot in IMAX.
Yeah, it was shot in IMAX. It's meant to be seen in IMAX, and any other reiteration of it will just change and distort a lot of what's in there. But for the most part, most people who have seen the trailer have seen it, either on their computers or maybe in their home cinema. And it's certainly not the same experience as what I experienced in the theater. It was just really transformative. I mean, this is, and Tom, you and I were talking about this earlier today. This is the blockbuster that we're waiting for. This is the level of quality that we've been waiting for and are eager to see. And we're starving. Like we're just starving for this, because we haven't had anything like this. Yes, in so long. And I can't even imagine having to watch that at home. Like, that to me is absolutely ridiculous. And I do sympathize with people who have to do that. But I think it's such a waste. This film needs the cinema. It's just, you can't see it properly without seeing it that way. And, just whoever's watching it, just go to the movies and see Dune in the movie theater.
Warner didn't do themselves any favors by releasing the trailer in just simple 1080p on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's like, why is it not in 4K? That would help you a little bit. And the other side of it is, a lot of these people that I'm sure are saying, like, oh, it looks meh. Look, and I understand this wholeheartedly. There's a lot of, worry about this taking directions in a modern way that we've seen other franchises, most recently He-Man today. I don't know if you saw any of my ranting and raving on that, but I do know this much from hearing you and Andre talk about the script, Robert. the changes that were made to certain characters are so minimal, or they don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, and so they're just doing it to get, you know, the Twitterati off their back a little bit. And in the end, I hope that Dennis Villeneuve, however you say his name, Favre, whatever.
Yep.
However you say his name, I hope he is the uber fan that he claims he is, and he delivers. And this could be his moment to shine, or his moment to burn in the sun, as they say, you know, in the old what Greek mythology story goes. Which one ever what is? I can't remember which one it was. The name of it, but yeah, you know, I hope it's good. I've noticed a lot of interest in it that I didn't realize was there at first. So I think a lot of the pushback just has to do with some of the race swapping and gender swapping, if anything. But
well, you know, it's funny to me, like, and I tweeted out tonight. I was like, you can race or gender swap a character if it's done well, and I think one of the great in our age, Cara Thrace, Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica, was, I think, an incredibly well done change of the character. Now, Liet Kynes, Dr. Kynes in Dune, is not a significant character necessarily, and he happened to be the father of a character, and I won't say who if you don't know the story. But so they switched, they swapped her out because in the Dune saga, women are incredibly important to the state of the galaxy. And as the books move along, especially Frank Herbert's books, the female characters become incredibly important. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, the whole idea of what's going on, they're the ones that are the Machiavellian manipulators of the galaxy. And I think in the story of Dune, if you're making it now, I think the idea of changing a particular character and you want to have some feminine energy isn't a bad thing. And the character that they swapped, Liet Kynes, Dr. Kynes, that works for me. I'm like, okay. The same way that Starbuck worked for me. And it's funny because I really feel that if Battlestar Galactica had come out today, people would have been apeshit. They would have gone bananas. And by the way, they did go bananas in the when modern the new Battlestar Galactica came out, and I'm like, bruh, I watched every episode of Battlestar Galactica when it aired. It wasn't good. I mean, if you think about it, in the pilot episode, it was awesome as a kid, but in the pilot episode, Starbuck watches all of humanity destroyed. And by the end of the episode, he finds literally an alien girl group that they each have two mouths, and he's talking about putting them on the galactic circuit to make money, to make qubits. I'm like, bruh, the 13 colonies or the 12 colonies, humanity is destroyed, and you're talking about a girl group and like managing them and putting them out on what circuit would that be? Everything you know has been destroyed and you're dead. It's not like the original Galactica was sacrosanct. So I thought what Ron Moore and David Icke did with modern Galactica was pretty extraordinary. And, you know, Cara Thrace was a great character. So I think Dune's going to fucking rule, man. And my point is that I think that it looks amazing. It looks like somebody who really wanted to make this made it their life's ambition to make this movie. I mean, it was like whatever Denis Villeneuve was doing. I mean, you can tell from the trailer and the description that you and Zephyr Chan gave last night. I'm like, this looks like it is exactly what we all want. We want a creator that loves this property, that's doing everything to honor this property. And I felt that way when I read the screenplay. I was like, okay, they get it. John Spates. I mean, it does bother me, the new showrunner that was announced for the Bene Gesserit show, because she, once again, has no experience other than the originals in genre programming. It's all procedural work. I mean, from Crossing Jordan to Medium to Empire. I mean, I'm like, and I'm really tired of these science fiction shows being treated like a CBS procedural. We need people that understand genre fiction. And a lot of TV writers, they jump from show to show to show. And the TV business hires people that, well, you have experience writing these 6 shows, so you should write this show. Without any understanding, like, you know what? I don't know if you got hired because it's called the Sisterhood. No, it should have been called the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, so people don't think that, I don't know, Tyler Perry made it. I mean, I think it's really, they want to shy.
The name is misleading, and I think that they generalize the name so that they wouldn't turn away viewers. They're trying to do everything to do that. Getting back to what you were saying about the Fremen, they have these women called the Sayidina, and they're essentially like Bene Gesserits, but for the Fremen. So, that's something that really hasn't been explored in cinema at all. And I'm just curious, I don't know if you've ever watched Empire. I'm just curious as to how, you go from Empire to see, sort of, being a showrunner for the Sisterhood, and I think that honestly, in my personal opinion, I want to see a lot of cutthroat action because, as you said, I think it was you, Tom, or someone on the stream earlier, they're master manipulators. So, I don't want to see like
in the universe.
Yes, I don't want to see a cooperative group of women who are doing whatever. I want to see complex interactions. I want to see them throughout the universe because in the first 10 minutes of the preview we saw, a Bene Gesserit woman was one of the party who was delivering the proclamation that was going to be signed. So, they get around, and when she arrived, when that Bene Gesserit woman arrived on the planet, Paul's mother was terrified of her. They made a point of letting you see her response. I can't imagine that. Now this is not a criticism of Paul's mother. She's involved with a man who's kind of like has a very high status, and and that's
she
fine.
is a Bene Gesserit. Lady Jessica is a Bene Gesserit.
Yes, she is, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, she didn't pick a man who's sort of like a private person that no one's going to hear about. She picks a man who happens to be one of the most important men in the galaxy. So of course they're going to know, the Bene Gesserits are going to know what you've done. She can't hide herself from this fact, and that's okay. I'm not judging her. But, sooner or later, I think that she might have suspected that, they would be coming. And she actually was very fearful. Of course she's fearful for her son and his survival, but they did a nice job of it because she wasn't able to keep her cool. And I imagine she's probably very good at keeping her cool. This must have scared her to death, seeing that Bene Gesserit woman arrive on the planet and kind of look at her and kind of like saying, I know what you've done, and I have some news for you.
It's awesome because what happens after that woman, Mother Mohayim she's like, you bared a son and you weren't, and that's why she's scared because, then she knows for those of you who've seen the Gom Jabbar and the whole put your hand in the box, there's a great scene where she's basically like, I'm going to kill you, Paul. And that's at the beginning of the movie. You're going to fucking die if you don't, and he passes the test. She can't kill him. And it's awesome. And that's when the Bene Gesserit, they're not dumb.
No,
they are the master manipulators, and it's so, and that's why I don't have a problem with the gender swapping of Dr. Kynes, because as far as the Fremen are concerned and the strength and all of these people, there is no, we can't apply in terms of this particular IP, Dune. Gender swapping doesn't matter to me as much because of the universe that it's set in and the importance of the feminine in this universe. Mm-hmm. Now, I think a lot of the time, I think it's horrible pandering. But I think everything needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And in Dune, if you're fans of the 6 Herbert novels and the ones beyond and have read those, how important the feminine is to the entire Dune saga and how important the Bene Gesserit is. That's why it's disconcerting to me to see that they would hire somebody whose writing background is about police procedurals and yes, female-oriented police procedurals. But I'm like, gosh, this show isn't about ladies who are doing police procedurals. This is about the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, and your knowledge of it is not indicated by doing 20 years of procedurals. You need to read some science fiction, lady. And I understand why she got the job, but my fucking God, I am so fucking tired of our televised science fiction written by people who have never clearly read science fiction. They don't even know
like science fiction.
They don't even like it. They haven't read it. It drives me fucking crazy. And the proof is in the pudding. We are getting the worst televised science. Hang on. Let me back up. I love it when I see something like The Expanse, which is a literary-based science fiction property. And while they've had to, rejigger the story, for the most part, the people that are working on The Expanse are honoring, they're adapting the literary work and doing a fairly good job of it. Star Trek was a show that was steeped in written science fiction. Half the writing staff of the original series, especially during the first and second season, were science fiction short story and novelists. They wrote plays, they wrote short stories, they wrote science fiction. These were real science fiction authors that Gene Roddenberry went and got to write the episodes. Modern science fiction or modern Star Trek is only written by people who have ever written TV.
Gilmore Girls and shit like that.
It is so far removed from real science fiction, so we're getting a bastardized, dumbed down, horrible version of science fiction. Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard are the dumbest science fiction TV shows ever. I mean, Manimal and Automan had more decent science fiction than Picard or Discovery. And that's not just me being a hater.
You're right.
It's me watching shows where there is no science fiction concepts, there's no understanding of, like, okay, let's talk about the experience of artificial intelligence. There's 50 great science fiction novels that you should read maybe one of, and you would have better ideas than the idea of AI we got in the second season of Discovery. That was what I would have written as a fifth grader back in 1978. And
And just to add to the Star Trek thing, and Tom, I also want your input as well. The Star Trek films, not all of them, but most of them I've seen in the theater with Star Trek fans.
Right.
And that also was a little different, a different experience. I think that the value of seeing a film with others who are excited about the film also adds to your intensity of the experience. Whether or not the plot was what you thought it was going to be, or, sometimes it may not have been the best film, but boy, when you went to go see it, that was a good experience.
And that was part of it. It was the experience of going that opened your mind. I mean, when you sat in that theater, your brain was receptive. You didn't have anything. You weren't worried about what text you were going to get, because there was no phones. You were there and that was the whole point, was that all of your senses were eliminated except your eyes and your ears and your mind. And you were there and you were focused on something else other than yourself. And I feel part of the problem with our modern age is we never let go of ourselves. We're constantly, whether we're getting input from our phones, everything, we relate to the world as what it means to us. And I feel that when we were younger, we were reaching out, like, when you walk out your front door, don't expect the world to be the way you want it to be. You need to go meet the world. The world is what's exciting. And when you would go into the movie theater, you should forget yourself, and sit down and go into another world. Immerse yourself in a story. And your life does not matter for the 90 minutes or 2 hours that you're looking at that film. All that matters is the world that movie shows you. And I feel the loss of movie theaters, if you're just watching a movie at home, knowing you're in your house, you can stop the film. Hey, your mom calls you, you take a call. The spell of the film, you're never 100% giving yourself over to that story, which means it's never coming into your mind and your imagination the way it does in a movie theater. And I think that our society is giving up. It's like when you go, like what I love the symphony. I love going to like the Disney Performance Center downtown LA and seeing a symphony perform, because it's all about the music. You know, you're feeling music. That's what you're there for. You're not looking at your phone. You're listening. There's not even, you can watch the orchestra, but it's not, but to feel the music, the beauty of composers that lived 400, 500, 600 years ago, writing these incredible pieces of music, and modern composers too. But when you're sitting in that symphony hall, nothing else matters. And I feel that we need that. We need, you know, we're not all into transcendental meditation or yoga, although down dog's not so bad, if you know what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that, like, when you get into a position where you cease to matter, and it's the movie that takes over, and there's something very cathartic about that, and I don't want to lose that.
And Tom, please tell us about some of your experiences.
Well, to answer your first part of your question, as far as like the writing part with Star Trek and stuff like that, yeah, I mean, reflecting what R&B said, you have to have a basis. Like you can bring in some specialty writers, like, you know, some ringers in a football team, you know, like, oh, we need a running back, or we need this, that, or whatever, who may not be your standard running back, but, you know, he might have potential. Like Walter Mosley's a great example.
Oh, man.
You bring in a Walter Mosley when you already have an established team who's good at writing sci-fi, and you want to bring somebody in who's going to bring in something fresh to the table. And what they did was, instead of it just was not a good situation for the gentleman, unfortunately. But the big main problem is with Star Trek is that, like you said, Robert, and this goes across the board with everything else, extended to, even though some of the people I'm debating in the chat over Motu, but you know, into this new Masters Universe show, is you have people who do not fundamentally understand what made the original property successful, but that's not always necessarily as important as someone who understands the property. Because for every Nicholas Meyer you get out there, who's somebody who can come in, who's like, I don't know Star Trek, but I understand it's this. I watched a few episodes.
But they understand literature.
But they understand exactly my point is they understand literature. They know how to tell a good story. They know how to bring good characters out through said story. And we're missing a lot of that anymore. And that's in everything across the board. And unfortunately, to go way back to the other part of what we were talking about to begin with the whole theatrical thing is, you know, that's where we're just so like inundated with so many films. Like, Robert, going back to when we were younger, you know, and I know Arm's not old enough to be this old, so, you know, going back to when we were younger, of course, you know, we were lucky if we'd get, you know, 200 movies, if that, a year out of Hollywood on average. That's what, quadrupled then some by now. Like, it's more like what, 1,000, 2,000 movies that come out every year. So I don't blame you for sitting there going, yeah, I'm going to catch that on streaming, because there's too much stuff for you to have to keep up with. There was a point where, like, in the early 90s or mid to late 90s, I almost had pretty much watched just about everything that had come out, because it was actually easy to go see that week's two big movies, or two movies that would come out, and maybe an independent film. Now, like you're saying, there's 30 movies that come out on any given weekend. I mean, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but I'm not really in some cases, because almost every major studio release a film every weekend, and so will however many independent companies. And you would think that the world is set up, and the way the theater system is set up, that the independent features should have a more access, because digital should have opened that all up. Because you know, and I know, the big thing that got between you and us and the studios telling a story and making a movie was that it is almost impossible to get a movie for less than X amount of money done on any kind of film, with the sound, the equipment, all that kind of shit you need. And you and I both know You can do all that stuff now on your fucking phone so cheap. The thing that's getting in the way is the gatekeeping bull crap. And maybe this thing that's happening right now is going to open up the revolution for independence, because I think the theaters are going to get a little bit more open to the idea of independents coming in and four-walling these theaters. And I know you know what that is from back in the day.
Oh,
and I think that might become a thing too. Not just that, theaters know they can bring in events. There's concerts. There's constantly concerts going on now in theaters. There's all kinds of other ways and revenues that they can come up with. The movies aren't going to be the only thing, but I think the key thing is still going to be the movies, and it's movies like Dune that are going to bring people into the theaters, I believe.
Well,
so get back onto that, yeah.
Darth Plato sends in a tip and says it's really sad that movie theaters are going away, even if only 90% gone. The best theater I ever saw was the cinema in Cotre, Madeira, which was only a 5-minute drive from me. I saw George Lucas there during the Star Wars Special Edition re-release in 1997. And then Darth goes on to say, I love the Bene Gesserit talk. She conducts well in Latin. I didn't know that. The Bene Gesserit are a fusion of the Jesuits and the women from the Ottoman age, the Sultanate of women, where brutal women were literally running shadow cabinets over the sultans behind the scenes. Yes, I mean a lot of Dune is based on Islam, and I love that. I think it's really great that Frank Herbert drew from real. I think it's very cool, and I love the idea that certain, like there's a science fiction series called Chung Kuo. I'm sure Zephyr's like, that's not how it's pronounced. But Chung Kuo, and it was a big science fiction series, and it was like hundreds of years in the future with China around the world. And I did like the fact that Frank Herbert looked into Islam and adapted a lot of the words like Muad'Dib and all that stuff. And I thought that was great. But, yeah, I mean, the Bene Gesserit sisterhood and all that, very heady concepts. And what's great is they're punching up. They're asking the audience, like Frank Herbert, and I think this is true of a lot of science fiction, which is why modern Star Trek drives me nuts. They were creating entertainment that expected you to rise up to their level. They're writing things that make you have to step up and think, as opposed to writing, elementary school drivel like the writers of Star Trek Discovery write. And that's what's maddening, is that science fiction, from the time I was a kid, made me step up, and I had to bring my A game. To read science fiction, you had to bring your A game. You had to open your mind. Like in Total Recall, Quaid, open your mind. You had to do that, and I feel now that it's all being dumbed down. So watching Dune, the trailer for Dune, you realize that, all right, they're once again expecting the audience to step up to their level. And I think that's what movies used to always do. Even when you'd watch, people don't remember this, but in the 70s, Disney made a lot of these live-action movies directed at kids, like Candle Shoe or Treasure of Matacumbe or the Herbie the Love Bug movies, or the Apple Dumpling Gang and the Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again, which was comedy westerns. They made these films for kids, but even those movies were not stupid. They expected you, even as a kid, you would step up and you'd get involved. You'd watch films and, these movies were not dumb and they were not pandering. They expected you as a kid to step up and bring something to them. And I feel now that there's something to be said. Culture itself needs people within it to aspire to make good culture rather than dumb everything down. And I feel like there's something to be said. Symphonies, we still build great symphony halls, and the Disney Symphony Hall is a beautiful building. It's a beautiful example of architecture. When you go there, you still think that there's something important happening inside. I feel that should be the same way with movies, and yet we don't feel that way as a culture.
Yeah, we're not getting the emotional responses from a lot of these shows that we should be getting. And, we're not even getting, like feeling like there's a message in what we're seeing. They kind of seem like they're missing something. And, obviously Dune is a story that has so much in it. And it's like there's great expectations from it, just from the aesthetic value of what we're seeing and the quality of how it's made. I think that for anyone who's a fan, once they see the film, they're going to be just happy with it. Of course, you can't fit everything in a film adaptation. We know this,
Right.
So no one should go in expecting, to see everything. But, when you can see, a good 50 to 75% of what you were expecting, I think it's a win, considering that, you have to somehow translate all this stuff into sort of a physical way. But in regards to quality, it's tough because for many of us, we grew up with seeing quality cinema. I mean, our parents had the luxury of having, maybe the best cinema. And then after that, the 80s and 90s had fantastic productions, and we're expecting to see that. And I think that Dune definitely is up to the bar of the level of excellence that we're hoping for. And that was another thing too, was that it felt good to see some quality work, for what it is. I mean, we've seen all different types of stories this year, but for this particular movie, you would expect a high level of excellence and a high production value, that's second to none. And I think that that's what we're getting. So, I'm really happy right now. I don't think I've felt this excited about a science fiction film in a long time.
I completely agree with you, because it looks like everybody expects the audience to bring their A game. We expect the filmmakers to bring their A game, but I love it when filmmakers expect us to rise to the occasion as audience members. And I felt that was, when I was growing up, I felt that was par for the course. I was so reverential about movies that when I would walk in there, I would realize I need to step up to their level. Because I grew up watching foreign films I didn't quite understand, like Antonioni's Ennui trilogy, whether it's La Notte, La Ventura, The Eclipse. I'm like, I didn't understand these movies. They were not exactly what I wanted, or they might have bored me, but I knew something was going on. I didn't quite get them. And even when I was watching films, like when I first saw Clockwork Orange, it blew me away. It was the first movie I ever watched twice back to back on home video. I think I was 14, and I'd read about it in these science fiction film books, but I'd never seen it. And I was like, what is this? And it was beyond me. And I watched it twice back to back, and it blew me away. And I feel nowadays this idea that, well, movies must appeal to the lowest common denominator is exactly what's wrong with our culture. No. We should demand, filmmakers should demand, studios should demand, the audience steps up. Of course, I know movies are more expensive now. I mean, I'm sure Dune, they say it's $165 million. Sure.
It looks like it costs $200 million, $300 million.
Yeah, it does. And it's a very heady literary property. But I do think that we can expect our audiences today to step up, because we've seen Lord of the Rings. We've seen Game of Thrones. I mean, up through the 4th season, it was an incredible show. And our audiences are very sophisticated. And I think it's really disappointing that we, as people, have now embraced our lowest common denominator. And I love it when something like Dune comes along and our filmmakers are like, you know what, you're all better than this. You've been served up drivel. Now we're going to give you some great literary sci-fi with our best actors, with our best technicians, and we expect you to at least meet us. Bring your intellect to the theater, and we will stimulate you.
I think Dune is has the chance to pull a Lord of the Rings.
I do
it
too.
Does, because if you remember, and I'm sure you do, Robert, when Lord of the Rings came out, not everybody really knew what it was. I mean, people were aware of it, but most people's recollection of Lord of the Rings or anything that had to do with anything related to it was the most popular thing at that point was the 1977 Hobbit TV film from Rankin and Bass.
Yep.
Most people, that's the only thing they knew, and they were otherwise. A few people might remember the Ralph Bakshi,
the one half
Lord of the Rings, one half exactly. So before that point, people were aware of it, but they weren't that aware of it, and it's not like everybody was like reading the books or anything.
They used to, but by the late
exactly.
90s, no one was.
And I think Dune is kind of in that place where people are aware of it. They're not necessarily sure what it is, but once they see this, I think they're at that point. We're at that point where we're due for another like Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
We're due for something like that. This could very well be it. I think the fact that it seems like there's a bit more interest in it than the Batman, it says something, because that's Batman, for Christ's sake. I mean, it was the original trailer for Dune was outpacing the Batman trailer by tons, and the Batman trailer even had like a month's jump on it.
Yeah.
And it was just insane by how much better it was playing on YouTube. And it was just, there's little things like that I've picked up on that I'm like, wow, maybe this thing has a lot more to it than I initially thought. And it seems to be a lot of interest in it. And I keep saying, we're coming off of Game of Thrones and all that kind of stuff. Maybe this is the time, because when I explain to people what I understand Dune to be best, it's like I say, like, think of something like kind of like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones with a little bit of Lord of the Rings sprinkled in. That's kind of what it is. That's the best way I can explain it, because of all the, espionage and the backstabbing and the whole thing and the way the story's told. And again, I can understand people not going to the books either, because like Lord of the Rings, it can be a bit of a read,
Yeah, well, no, I agree with you. And I've tried to explain to people that Dune was first published in 1965. When I first came across Dune, in 1977, when I was 10, I joined the science fiction book club. And Dune was one of the first books I got from the science fiction book club. And I didn't read it till I think I was 11 or 12. That's when I started it. And back then, the literary canon of science fiction was a big deal. I mean, most science fiction conventions were literary based. In Seattle, where I grew up, they had Norwest Con, and media was like the redheaded stepchild. And by the way, I love the redheads are being erased. Everyone knows I love redheads. But media was not a good thing, because there was very few great movies or television that was good science fiction or horror or whatever. But Dune was revered. I mean, there were certain books like Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land that nobody knows right now. Half the audience is like, wait, what? Well, when I was growing up, Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land and Valentine Michael Smith, I mean, these were a big deal. Like, I grok Spock and all that. Like, what does it mean to grok something? I wore a pin in junior and high school that said, I grok, Grok. I will bet you that the audience that's watching this show right now has never heard the word grok. Well, in science fiction circles, when I was in my teens, everyone knew the word grok. Everyone. Nowadays, no. Because back in the day, literary books were as important to all of this as anything else, and that was something that a lot of people forget. So Dune, in my youth, Dune was hugely important. It was a big part of, like, you couldn't be a science fiction film fan or whatever if you didn't know Dune. Like, it was something like you had to know it. And it's not that what's strange now, a lot of people let me just say right here, we just got in a Norwegian Kryptonian sends in a super chat and says, Rob, I don't know anything about Dune. Is there something wrong with me? Laugh out loud. Absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with you because why would you? No one knows anything about classic science fiction anymore. If you go and people are like, science fiction, that's the Hunger Games. You talk about epic fantasy. It's even Harry Potter was the last generation.
I think that's more fantasy than science fiction. In
Yeah,
my personal opinion.
but no, absolutely. But that's what I mean. It's whether it's science fiction, fantasy, or Hunger Games being a dystopian. It's people don't know all of these things are. It's very, very different than it used to be, and
Well,
things are just different. Wait, you're still with us? Yes, sir. We lost your picture.
Tom, you're still with
yeah,
us,
yeah.
right?
I'm off camera for a minute. I'll be right back. But like, no, I agree. Things are a little bit different. But it's funny you mentioned like Hunger Games and stuff like that. That's another thing I think about Dune is it has the potential to tap into that YA audience a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not comparing Dune in
No,
any
I know why you
way,
say that. I mean, Paul
shape, or
Atreides in the book's
form.
14 years old.
Yeah, exactly. My point is like there's so many elements to this story that could really lend itself to that audience. So it could do potentially what a lot of these other properties are trying to do and bring in a young crowd.
Oh,
And
I
agree with
think
you.
they will.
Yes, and one other thing that I think is interesting is that a lot of times when when we've read these science fiction novels, not all the time, but often there is sort of a moral lesson or a message, as far as I'm concerned, in the story. And oftentimes when they're adapted into either film or TV, that message, is translated into, the version that you see on the screen. And so that was the thing to me that was somewhat disturbing about, the newer version of Star Trek that we've received is that what is the message? Because it's very hard to identify in a lot of the episodes what it is. What is the message? And we can't push the message away because the whole point of it was that there's some sort of science element that's going to aid in this message and be incorporated in the story. So once you realize there's no message, I think that when you look at some of these stories, they kind of feel a bit lacking. There are some people out there who do love those. But if we're looking at, the heart of that story and what drives it, there's always some sort of message and it's meant to enrich our lives. It's meant to encourage us to make our lives in society better.
Yes, I mean, I think, well, that's what science fiction does. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but Brian Aldiss, one of the people that helped Stanley Kubrick come up with the idea of AI, said, and I'm paraphrasing, that what science fiction is a way to make sense of our world in our confused state of knowledge and understanding. And when we have things like, for instance, the technology that exists in our world, we might not have come to grips with it morally or ethically, like AI or gene splicing, CRISPR or whatever. Well, science fiction comes along and says, here's a story about, say, genetic engineering that you might want to listen to, and maybe you can glean something from it. And that's what I think is the power of science fiction. And that was what Star Trek, Outer Limits, and Twilight Zone were all about. They all came out of that same era. And I don't think the people that are writing a lot of modern science fiction, unless they're basing it on a book like the people from The Expanse do, I don't think there's a lot of understanding of what science fiction actually is as a genre. And like people think about like evil AI and they think Terminator. And it's like that's a very rudimentary idea of what science fiction is, whereas Dune is all about human society. It's all about the great religions of the world, the great belief systems of the world, the great political systems and economic systems. Dune is about politics. It is about economics. It is about ecology, and it is about religion. And what's so funny, that is diametrically opposed to what the internet audience wants to hear.
Yeah,
go ahead.
and I'm sorry, and the essence of Dune with this spice that allows space travel to be the norm. Now it's something you just wake up in the morning and expect to be able to do. Not, I wonder how I'm going to get to, the fourth quadrant of the galaxy. There's no wonder about that. You know that there's going to be a guild who's going to help you get there. And also one thing I wanted to mention, and I think I might have mentioned it before, this was one of the first versions I've seen of Dune where they talk about the economic cost. How much did it cost to bring the guild members and the Bene Gesserit woman, to the planet so we could sign this proclamation? How much do you think it cost? Well, gee, that's not anything that I was even thinking about before, it was brought to our attention. But there must be some cost. There must be some, value to this that, makes, obviously it's desirable to travel through space and time, but, that is something that must be considered. But perhaps, it wasn't on the top of my list. The monetary value of this and the effect that it's having over everybody, that, they're essentially, warring with the Fremen on their own planet, I think that it was important to mention it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the whole plot of Dune, and we don't see this in the first movie, but you've got the emperor of the known universe, the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. He's like, well, Duke Leto poses a threat to me. The House Atreides, these people threaten my power, and everyone likes Duke Atreides, and I need to get rid of him. But no one can know I'm going to get rid of him, so I'm going to make a deal with Baron Harkonnen, and we're going to have them betrayed, and the guild navigator's like, you better make sure this is works out for you, because we need our spice to continue to evolve so we can fold space. I mean, there's so much going on in this. There's so many machinations and so much Machiavellian scheming. And it's all, you look at it, it's Shakespearean. Dune is very Shakespearean in terms of its scheming and all that. And that's what makes it great. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't understand. I don't care about all of that, but even something like Game of Thrones was all based on stuff like the War of the Roses. It's all based on history and what happened. And Dune, Frank Herbert drew so much from our own history. So much, there's so much Dune has to say about us today. I mean, I think Dune is more relevant now than ever. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that people who watch the movie realize that, wow, here's a movie that's literally about politics, economics, religion. And people, as I say this, people are like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. Isn't it a sci-fi action adventure? Yes, it is. But it's also about politics, religion, economics, kingdoms. It's great. It's really fulfilling. So yes, so kids, do you think that you need to see Dune? I mean, right now it's still day and date with HBO Max. The two of you think that people could go see this movie filmed in IMAX and watch it on streaming and still get something out of it?
No, I don't think that streaming is going to be a benefit for a film like this. And I think one of the other viewers, one of the other chat members in a stream today mentioned how they, I think it was Nerd Cookies. She mentioned that while you were watching the film, at first, the trailer, at first, your perception of what you were watching, you're going to see, you saw these large containers that were filling up with spice. And, at first, perhaps you don't have a perception of the size of that vehicle. Mm-hmm. And then if you look down towards the bottom of the screen, you can see like people that were the size of ants. And then that's when you got a sense of the magnitude of these particular items on the screen. That alone is an argument for going to see it in IMAX, because it's clearly something. And I think that not just even in depth of field, but even in the experience overall, when there aren't any vehicles on the screen, when you're just seeing the flows of the dune, and just trying to imagine what it would be like to have to go and live on this planet with this essence, this spice that, can really mess with you, so to speak. You're not going to be the same when you get on the planet. because now all of a sudden there's this magical spice that's in the air that will change you, just like it changed Paul. I think that was something that was very unique in a sense. Perhaps the other people in that vehicle had already been to the planet once or twice, and they understand what's going on. But for many of us who haven't been there, and we want to understand, what this planet is like, it's not just sand. There's this other element in it that once you are exposed to it, it's going to transform you somehow.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I was just saying that, and I think that when you watch it in the theater, you're going to get that sense of it. You might not fully understand it. And it's not really something that I think you're supposed to understand every single thing while you're in that theater.
Right.
I'm still, rehashing and thinking about different things that I saw just in the first 10 minutes of what was going on. And even Paul and his mother's existence, which I'm not going to say is entirely true, but they seem to sort of like be a pair on their own, away from the father who seems very, it's not that he's an absentee father, but I get a sense that he and his mother have shared something dramatically different from his relationship to his father. And, and you can see that like in the first 10 minutes when he's at the table with his mother, and, she mentions to him that he has to make sure he gets dressed for this event. And, he's a little reluctant. She says, your father wants you in your military regalia, and he has to be resplendent and everything. And he does do it. Like he shows up. But I think that even the relationships and the way that it's portrayed in the film, can you imagine if it was shown on a TV at home and they cut it in half and you just see Paul and then you just see the mother, and versus seeing them together at the table and the just even the looks, because a lot of what they're doing and a lot of what their power has to do with looking at one another and kind of giving messages to one another that may not necessarily be verbal all the time. So, it's like, when do I act on this power? When, how do I properly use this power so I can, become the person that I'm supposed to be? So it's going to lose so much. And I really fear for that. I think that whenever they convert it to what, like seeing it in on home theater, it's going to lose a lot. And I almost wish I had seen the original Dune, the original one from the 80s on the screen now. I almost wish I had seen that on a big screen. I never saw it on a big screen.
But now I saw it opening night.
Yeah, I wish I had seen it. I mean, if I see it in another theater, I'm just going to go ahead and buy tickets to it just to see what the original intention of the movie was like.
I have to say that I think the problem with the original Dune is it was compromised from the get-go, in that it has beautiful sets, and I think the actors are incredible, but the special effects, not just because of the time they were done, they also lacked even in 1984 when the movie came out. And there were it was a deeply compromised work from all around. I actually really like the original Dune, but it's problematic from a production standpoint because on one hand they wanted to make it an epic film and they skimped on the visual effects, and you can't. I mean, as you saw, the sandworms of Dune are, for those of you who don't know, and you know that, Dune has sandworms, those are people that have been evolved through the exposure to spice, and they have grown into these giant. I mean, the concepts in Dune are enormously complex. And in the first book, you don't understand that. You don't understand that like you get like there's guild navigators and basically what's happening is, and this is another thing about Dune, is that drugs are the expansion of human evolution, human consciousness. And at the time you had Timothy Leary and LSD, and what Frank Herbert was doing was he used this substance, the spice, and what people would be addicted to it, but you would take it and it wouldn't just expand your mind. It was the next stage of human evolution. and you began, if you were somebody who, the Fremen, anyone who lived on Dune would experience it, but the whole point was that certain people were evolving into new levels of existence and giant physical creatures, and they could fold space. The Spacing Guild were all. It's very difficult if you haven't read Dune to explain this, but the idea that drugs are not just mind expanding, but they're the evolutionary trigger for humanity. So it's a very and a lot of people. It's basically got a big pro-drug message in it, which might be something that a lot of people nowadays like, oh my God, drugs are bad. Jenny, eat something, like they said in Swingers. It was always about after-school specials. Helen Hunt's like, she jumped out a window. But there's all these things going on in Dune that make it really, really interesting. And I think in our day and age, where on one hand, every girl has an OnlyFans account who's 18. We still have this really weird streak of conservatism, and we're so schizophrenic as a culture. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Dune is received.
Yeah, and we mentioned Lord of the Rings in regards to the last time that we've really seen a film like this. There's another film that, and honestly, I don't know how it did in the box office, but I did actually see this film in the theater, and honestly, I felt that this is another film. The level of quality was fantastic. It was King Kong, the one that came out. I guess was it 05 or 06?
06, yeah. Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Yep.
I thought that the level of quality in that film, is up to par of what we're talking about. And, it's not every film that does this. We don't see this in every film. But when you have a director that seems to love the idea of what he's making, clearly he loved, and I remember Peter Jackson talking about how, and obviously there was a lot of CGI used for Kong, which is fine. Like you have no choice to do this, but he talked about working 1 or 2 weeks to create one particular expression on Kong's face. And, I don't know which expression that is, but he knows, like Peter, he knows. And it was important. And I realized to myself, this is very important. The aesthetic of when you're creating something of this magnitude, to reach this level of quality, it does take that level of dedication.
Oh yeah.
Not only just Kong's expression, but all of the other sort of prehistoric creatures that were on that island alone I haven't really seen anything like that since. He, clearly thought about, okay, let's look and see, what's prehistoric or, giant worms, all sorts of things. And it was terrifying, but just incredible at the same time. And I think that was really something that was a very special accomplishment.
I agree. And I think what people don't remember, Peter Jackson's King Kong begins with an unbelievably beautiful montage of New York City during the Depression
era New York City, yes.
And it is spec-fucking-tacular. It is so beautiful, and it was all shot in New Zealand. It's not like they went to New York, and it is so. I mean, look, I don't think King Kong is a masterpiece or beyond reproach. I think a lot of it is self-indulgent. But like you said, I do love it. And the extended version, I love like the period, the evocative period, being on that tramp steamer, going to Skull Island, all of that stuff. And the ambition. And what I love is it's all auteurist. It's all Peter Jackson. He had already earned what he got all the credibility in the world, and he sat down to do this great auteurist vision. And for that alone, it's amazing. And there's very few people in the world. There's probably less than 10 that can command those resources to bring those visions to life. Mm-hmm. And, as much as I didn't love it, but Mank David Fincher's Mank, which his father wrote. He cashed in his. He's an incredible filmmaker, but he made something a passion project. Now, it might not have tickled my genre fancy, but still, when you can see a filmmaker who's earned the clout to make what they want, those movies matter. And, a lot of people, it's so funny because Peter Jackson's King Kong is a wonderful accomplishment. But people are like, wow, it wasn't as satisfying as Lord of the Rings. No,
I disagree.
It's completely self-indulgent and ridiculous, but I love it. It's so beautifully made. There's so talk about King Kong. What do you think of it?
Oh, I love it. I actually think it's one of the better remakes.
I agree.
It does everything that a remake should do, in that it pays homage to the original. It does things that the original couldn't do better, and it also explores things a little bit better in ways. Now, is it a better film? Oh, hell no. But to me, King Kong is one of those films that's like quintessential cinema. You know what I mean? Like it was started as a film. It has been remade several times over. To me, it's one of those movies that I hope I'll see another version again in 20 years. Yeah. I have nothing against. I'll love every version probably more than the next just as much or whatever. Of course, the original always hold a special place for me. But hey, there's a lot of things I love about the 76 version. For that,
dude, I'm right there with you. And that new
Mm-hmm.
Scream Factory or Shout Factory disc with the TV version.
The TV cut was great. Yeah, I mean, I love the extended cut too of the Jackson version, like you were saying, Robert.
So good.
Even as self-indulgent as it is in one of those cases, it's not like a case of like Zack Snyder's self-indulgent though.
No. It's all
serving the film. Yeah. I mean, there's a few things here and there, but not really to that extent. But yeah,
I think the difference between like Zack Snyder. It's funny. I watched a video today about cinematography and Zack Snyder, and it was somebody cut together a montage of all these images from Zack Snyder movies, and they were all basically recreations of comic book panels.
Right.
And I think that like Zack Snyder's really good at doing that. I don't think he's a great intellect. Like if I were to sit down and want to delve into Watchmen, like Zack Snyder beautifully recreated a lot of Watchmen. I don't think it's a particularly good adaptation of Watchmen.
No.
Because it's very superficial. It's very here's what is in the panels, but what the panels are about, not so much. Mm-hmm. But still, there's a place for that. Whereas Peter Jackson's King Kong, I find delicious. I love watching these characters. I love I could watch a 10-hour version of King Kong. Just because each individual I would have watched a mini series about his recreation of Depression era New York.
Yeah.
Whenever that scene's over, like Ann Darrow, and I'm like, no, can't we stay in New York for like another hour? Because I love it so much. I mean, I know it's not the plot of the movie, but it's the recreation is so evocative. You just want to live in that world for a while.
Yes.
Lord knows there's a version out there, and you would know probably that there's probably an hour in New York.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, totally. By the way, there's people keep firing things in, and
yes.
I hate to wait till the end because.
Yes, that's true. Super chat.
The slasher face. This is from El Necron. Says the slasher face teaser trailer, Rob. It features my band Hod and looks to be a fun, gory time. The premise: a mysterious stranger crashes a metal party. Well, I'll tell you what, El Necron. I'm going to put that link in the live chat. So if you want to see this trailer, there it is. I believe I hope I did. I hope I sent the right trailer in there. And then Wakazashi's Tea House, our friend Wakazashi, who Wakazashi says Dune looks absolutely epic in scope. It will be visually stunning and has to be seen on a big screen. I can't wait. Word of mouth might make it huge. I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do. I really do. Our friend Bob Dylan, who is a great supporter of Justin at Justin's collection. By the way, Justin crushed it going off against Sideshow Toys the other night. Kudos to Justin. You're fighting the good fight. Bob Dylan says, hyped for Dune, and theaters will always be in my heart. I had no idea the amazing and wonderful is on this stream. Smiley
you.
face. Somebody's got a crush.
Didn't you make your debut on a Robert Meyer Burnett stream, if I'm not mistaken?
Did you?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Man, I gotta tell you, I pick a lot of. I think I've got a good nose for feminine talent. I mean, Zephyr Chan is great. Of course, Willow Yang, who I've only got fleetingly once. She was great too. Her letters are great. Come on. And now there was a couple. I forget their names, but they asked me. They were great too. I'm gonna bring them on again. So you know. John Campia, he has a good nose for talent, but I got to tell you, I'm more drawn toward the ladies. So, you know, I find
I know how it is.
I know I'm happy to have them here. So, my God, and by the way, just makes me look better. So it's good to have her here. So,
thank you,
Ron. No, thank you. Ron C sends in a super chat and says, Rumblefish. Now, Ron C, if memory serves, last night you'd watched The Outsiders. Now you got to Rumblefish, which he made. I love Rumblefish, Coppola's 1983 Rumblefish. Greatness. The Outsiders actors, Matt Dillon, Mickey Rourke, Vincent Spano, Diane Lane, Nicolas Cage, Dennis Hopper. Let's bring back the magic. Don't forget, Stuart Copeland from The Police did the score. And Standard Ridgeway from Wall of Voodoo, Mexican Radio, he sang the theme song, Don't Box Me In. Kinky Sphincter, which is what I like to think about my own. Kinky Sphincter says, I just want to see Rebecca Ferguson do her lovely lip bite in IMAX. Who doesn't? My God, Rebecca Ferguson is some kind of beauty. Oh, my God. Anyway, so I just want to get through what you're saying. By the way, if you want to talk to us, you know, what do I say? I never say this. Use the tip feature, the super chats, or whatever. We'll talk to you. There you go. So back to you guys. So let me ask you this. So we've got 2 movies coming out in October. The new James Bond film with a reported production cost of $250 million. And with that much money, in order to make it worthwhile, it has to gross $1 billion theatrically, if not more, to make it worth the while. And of course, Dune also comes out in October. With the rise of the Delta variant and the new, I think, the Lambda variant, which is now something new. Even, do you guys think that Dune and No Time to Die will be coming out on time, or will they get postponed?
I think Dune is definitely going to be is definitely going to come out on time, and I think the James Bond film has to come out now. I think if they postpone it any longer, there's going to be an issue, even more of an issue with that film. So I think they're both going to be coming out, and we're going to see them in the theaters, and you know, it'll go from there.
What do you think, Tom?
I don't know about No Time to Die so much. I think Dune is kind of on this track where they've already kind of decided that this is going to. The only way this movie was ever coming to both HBO Max and theaters at the same time is if Legendary signed off on it. So I have a feeling that Warner cut them a huge check. Huge one, because I don't know if you heard anything like I did when Godzilla vs. Kong came out, but Legendary lost their minds. They were so upset by how much money was left on the table. So I'm thinking that HBO gave them a sweetheart deal like they did with Wonder Woman 84, which, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, the director and Gal Gadot had back-end points on the movie, but since it didn't come out in theaters properly, the studio sought upon themselves to just give them a bonus based on the idea that the film probably would have made $1 billion. So my assumption is they probably cut a check to Legendary in the same vein. So they have to hope and pray that this pays off for them. But HBO's in a really good spot right now, because I think you talked a little bit about this, Robert, too, but like the streaming services are all on a downward slope except for one, and that is HBO Max, which is consistently seeing a lot of growth. And I think that the estimates leading into Dune is that it's going to bring yet another 2-3 million subscribers on board. So that's a big win for them, and they're just consistently on this upward trend. And Discovery's another app that's actually doing very well too. And I think that's another good thing for them is getting that combination between the two. And hopefully that'll help whatever problems HBO Max has right now, and this to bring some more synergy with Discovery, which is one of those apps that everybody I told before was hearing from everybody is the must-have app, and it's the little engine that could right now that nobody saw doing what it's been doing. So,
well, I got to tell you, man, it's good that you bring that up because I really like HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
I do too. Yeah.
And what I like about it is you go into HBO Max, and I don't know how they do this, but they're like, oh, I love that. Like you go on to HBO Max, you start searching, and there's just all this stuff you love. And I click on shit, and like one of my favorite things about streaming services is I'll watch like 20 minutes of a movie, just because I love this movie, just to like refresh my memory. And HBO Max has a lot of that. I go into Netflix, and I'm like, what the fuck do I watch? Like I don't know. I'm like there's so much. There's so many different things. But HBO Max seems pretty focused. There's shows like Sex and the City or Oz or Dream On or whatever the fuck they have, and then there's movies, and the movies are good. So there's one and all of those things I like. I go to Netflix and I love Netflix, but I'm like it's overwhelming. There's a tsunami of choices, and I find myself spending more time just clicking and seeing all these shows I've never heard of and going, what's this? What's this? It's like a Nightmare Before Christmas. What's this? What's this? There's television shows in the air. What's this? What's this? There's documentaries over there. What is this? I don't fucking know. And I never click on anything to watch. But with HBO... Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Does it make a difference in the fact that HBO has been making quality programming for over 20 years?
That's it. That's part of it. Yeah,
that is part of the other part of it is that they have so much. Like when people stop, we got to remind them how much Warner Brothers actually owns.
Yeah.
And there's even stuff on there that's not Warner related because of the HBO deal. And yeah, my only real big complaint outside of the price high, it's a bit expensive for HBO Max.
It's spendy.
Outside of that is just the navigation part of it. Everything is kind of sectioned off in a funky way. I think they've upgraded it a little bit. It's gotten a little bit better, but no, like you're right, Robert. I do the same thing with. I'll go on Netflix unless I know specifically what I'm looking for. It's this endless cesspool of, like you said, you don't recognize anything. Something kind of looks, but then you're like, I don't know about that. Outside of like when I went to see like The Irishman and Dolomite and Motu and Cobra Kai, I rarely go on Netflix. I shouldn't even have it every month. But no, HBO Max, I always find myself watching something, like you said, either it's the first 15, 20 minutes. I've been watching slowly here and there. Every once in a while, I'll start watching Forbidden Planet again.
Yeah. Right. Another, yeah.
And then I watched RKO 281 all the way through the other night.
That's really good, too.
I love that fucking movie. And
Great
you brought up
movie.
Mank. It's like I prefer that one over Mank, even though they're technically kind of the same story.
No, it's a better movie than Mank. It's more
It
entertaining.
is a much better movie than Mank, in my opinion. And there's all those kind of things on there too. Plus, like I said, there's other older films that aren't necessarily owned by Warner Brothers, but they're there.
Yeah.
They're there right now. And Revenge of the Nerds is one of them that's really hard to find. It's like Disney has done whatever they could since they've gotten a hold of Fox to erase that movie. You can't buy it digitally right now. Well, it's on HBO Max, but it's not anywhere else.
Well, because it's so funny to me that one of the things that gets a movie scrubbed away from our modern world right now is if it has sexual content. And Revenge of the Nerds, guys want to get laid. And the idea that, my God, our biological imperatives, let's not talk about any of that anymore. We are so infantilized as a culture. And the idea, like, it's bizarre. It like where's Porky's?
Yeah,
I mean, where's the last American virgin?
Yep,
Yeah.
another one. Yeah, it's hard to find. A very hard one.
I mean, you look at this stuff and you're like, you know, I used to live in a world where I just understood it was par for the course that people want to fuck.
But,
Yes,
Nowadays-
and HBO started it all with their documentary "Real Sex."
Oh
You know,
my
like,
God! I mean,
well, not just that,
and-
HBO in
and-
general, right?
where is
Right.
real sex now?
and Dream On was somewhat of a more adult version of a like a Seinfeld
Well,
show.
Skinamax
Martin
became a
Tupper
thing,
was
for
one of
Pete's
my
sake.
heroes. Brian Ben, and he married Madeline Stone. They're still married. The star of Dream On was winning at life. Come on, I love that show.
Well, let's not even get started on
show.
Skinamax. I mean,
Yes.
Hey man, look, I directed 5 episodes for Skinamax.
That's
Our
right.
show, you'll never see the show again.
no, you won't.
In
You're
this
right.
day and age, this show is so gone. And I'm like, look, we shot these in 3 days, and I tried. Unfortunately, HBO's version of sex was what a 14-year-old boy wanted. I mean, if you,
But that's what made HBO great.
yeah,
It's okay. It's really okay.
it's amazing that to me though. We made these 10 years ago, and they are gone. They'll
No,
never.
I know
They'll never. And they were on forever. They played them forever. You'll never see them again. It's too bad.
And then-
Yeah, Emmanuel and all that stuff. like,
Oh yeah. Oh my God. And it's not a wonder that a movie like, is it called Titane, won the Palme d'Or?
I mean, about a girl who fucks a car. I can't wait. And by the way, a female director who directed Raw, the French cannibal zombie. I loved Raw.
I remember that one. Okay, no,
yeah,
no,
and then
yeah.
she won the Palme d'Or, and everyone's freaking out. When I read what it was about, I'm like, I can't wait.
Would you even think a movie like Nympho could be made now?
don't know.
You mean Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Nymphomaniac.
No, part 1 and 2. No,
Yeah.
no, because sex is violence now.
Yeah.
You know that nowadays you cannot. And Nymphomaniac is about a woman as the aggressor who's embracing her sexuality.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
No, again,
Great
the
flick, but,
infantilization of our
Or
culture.
flicks.
We have been reduced to childlike status by activism and weird politics that wants to pretend that human beings aren't human beings. That we can buy into some ideological bullshit and not be people of flesh and blood. It's so weird. We live in a really weird time. It's bizarre.
Yeah, considering it's weird. Like I remember, like we were thinking, oh shit, back in the '80s, late '80s, early '90s. By the time we get to this point, Fox will have full blown hardcore porn, and the way they were going, we went in this opposite direction. It's strange,
And
it's
yet,
sad we have. Yeah, go ahead. I was just saying.
and yet, young girls have OnlyFans accounts.
Right,
Like
right.
we have taken the exploitation of feminine sexuality to a whole new level that I could never have believed possible. Like at any time you want, 24 hours a day, whether you're going on OnlyFans or ChatterBait or wherever the fuck you're gonna go, you can watch women serving themselves up on a silver platter, and you can tip them, and they give you a menu of sex acts that they will perform for you. And yet at the same time, we want to live in a world where people are talking about critical race theory, and they're telling you about ideologically how you should be. And I'm like, really? You really, in a world where OnlyFans exists,
Yes.
and I can watch whatever porn you want me to buy into your ideology, and you're going to talk about getting rid of private property and collectivism and whatever, and yet I've got girls that are 18 years old, and I can watch them perform sex acts for free on my computer if I want to.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, or see them have a conversation with them at a pool, at a beach, or at a hot tub. You know, those are the locales that intellectual minds want to meet at.
I mean, but what's so funny is we're living in these. On one hand, all these activists are pushing this worldview, and on the other hand, I'm gonna subscribe to an 18-year-old girl. I don't, by the way, but I could if I wanted to.
Right, right.
And by the way, she would send me her Amazon wish list, and I would no problem. Oh, you want to buy me a $3,000 or $4,000 motorcycle that I wanted? Oh, thank you. I mean, we live in that world, so it's really difficult to reconcile the idea that we want to do the right thing and live in a world where humanity is progressing, where feminism has become, I can sell my body to you and exploit myself because it's my choice. We are through the looking glass so far, and I just want to watch movies that inspire me and are ideologically interesting and all of that. And yet at the same time, we are so in denial about how far fucked up we really are as a culture. But that's okay, because global warming is real. Vaccinations do stop you from dying, and the earth is not fucking flat. And yet, say what you want, the reality, what I love about reality is it is coming for you. It will come for you and it will get you. Believe whatever you want. It's fine. I don't care. But the reality of life is going to come and get you, and it is going to tear, as the Cenobites in Hellraiser, it will tear your soul apart. And don't cry to me when it does. Don't. Because it's coming. It's coming.
That's a very interesting analogy that you used, Hellraiser, because in a lot of the Hellraiser stories, there is that sense that they want to go into the unknown, but they're only fine with it if it's within their own parameters, and then they get the shock of their lives.
Yep. That's why I love, my God, did you just explain the Hellraiser series in a nutshell? The great thing about Hellraiser is the demons are like, you called us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, hey, man, we didn't ask you to open the lament configuration. It's like what I love. Hellraiser is one of my favorite horror films of the 80s. It's such a great movie because it's a movie about a guy. He was fucking his brother's wife. And he's like, you know what? I just didn't get off as much as I wanted to. And his wife like, oh my God, you changed my life. You're amazing. And he's like, you're a boring fuck. So you didn't do it for me. So I'm going to open a doorway to hell. I'm going to summon the Cenobites, and I want my soul torn apart because you are boring. And he does. And then he's like, wait a minute, wait. I didn't really mean it. I didn't really mean to have my soul torn apart. And that's the Hellraiser franchise, which has more to say about our modern age than maybe any other horror franchise does. Because it's like, I want this. It's going to be great. Oh, wait. I didn't want it to be this great. I didn't know it was... wait. Oh, shit. Well, yeah, your soul's damned, and you called us. And that's where we're at. You started that OnlyFans account. You started your Instagram account. And all those creepy guys from around the world that are texting you, hey, you want to hook up? Like, you wanted that. You made that happen. And now it's not what you wanted. What did you think was going to happen? And it's like, hey, man, you want to burn fossil fuels? You want to have single-use plastics? We don't care how much arsenic's in the groundwater. What does it matter? Well, the chickens will come home to roost.
So, recently, the same day that I went to see the preview of Dune, I also saw a film that there's been a lot of chatter about. It's Pig with
oh my God, Nicolas Cage. Oh, I can't wait to. Is it good?
It's fantastic. It's not for everyone. And I thought that the film, like if you're looking for a flashy film, this isn't it. This is a serious film, and I think it's one of his best performances.
Could you tell us? Like, I've read a lot about it. What is it about? Like, I haven't quite got a handle on it.
Right. It's about a man who pretty much is trying to cope with the loss of a loved one. And, you know, the loss is so profound to him. In fact, a lot of the film is about loss. The loss is so profound to him that he decides that he can't be around other people anymore.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that some very interesting things in the film are that obviously there is a pig that becomes his companion, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because many of the characters in the film have or are currently experience some sort of loss, and they're all dealing with it in different ways. And it's really a very touching story about, you know, the human condition and what happens when you find yourself, you know, when your whole world gets turned upside down. You know, how do you deal with this, and how do people treat you after knowing that you've experienced something so dramatic in your life? You know, obviously you're going to have a different reaction to that person. I mean, we can't pretend like you're going to be the same towards them after something, you know, like that. So, you know, I think there's also a very interesting relationship between a father and son in this story.
Wow.
And, you know, the idea of what does it mean? What does that relationship really mean? And what are some of the things that happen between a father and son that either can strengthen the relationship or, you know, cause, you know, breaks, cause turmoil there. And so, you know, while it's got some quirkiness to it, it's certainly got, you know, a little quirkiness.
Yeah.
But the overall message is worthwhile, and I loved it.
I've only heard great things about it, and you know, it's funny. I mean, Nicolas Cage obviously had tax problems, so he's been in every movie in the world. It seems like anybody who asks Nicolas Cage to be in a film, that he'll be in a film. But people forget he's one of our great actors. I mean, he's won an Academy Award.
Oh yes, this film was on the level of Leaving Las Vegas and or The Family Man.
Wow. Okay. I mean, Leaving Las Vegas was an incredible film. I mean, and someone brought up, I mean, our friend brought up, wait, who was talking about it? Hang on, let me go back and find out. I want to make sure I get this right. Ron C. talked about Rumblefish, and
right.
Nicolas Cage, I believe. Okay, so Nicolas Cage is actually Nicolas Coppola. He's part of the Coppola family.
Correct.
And Valley Girl was the first movie that he was Nicolas Cage in. I know that because I produced the DVD special features. And that was in 83, which is the same year as Rumblefish. I think in Rumblefish he's still Nicolas Coppola. But, and so Ron C. brought that up. But Nicolas Cage has been a world-class actor. And he has had an amazing career. And people forget, I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is a movie called Birdie that Alan Parker directed, and it's based on William Wharton's novel. Peter Gabriel did the soundtrack. It's an incredible film that stars Matthew Modine and Nicolas Cage. And people forget, because he's done so many crazy performances, he's a really terrific actor. And yet he's been working so much. It's so great to hear that Pig is sort of a return to form, where, again, he's being taken seriously, because so much of his output of the last 20 years has diminished. Like Bruce Willis has been completely diminished as an actor. But it's great to see Nicolas Cage deliver a performance that people are just raving about. And having him, not that he needed it, but, you know, an actor still has to, you can't just take every job. You have to live up to your potential, and it seems like with Pig he does. And I'm really happy to see that being the case.
I feel like we needed it. I feel like, you know, the audience needed this film. That's how I feel. And I don't think I guess someone else could have played that role, but I don't think it would have been appropriate with anyone else. I think it was a film that we need for our modern time. Wow. And, you know, that was something that I was very surprised by, in the sense of, you know, the importance of relationships and essentially, you know, how you deal with these relationships. We're talking about communication and how people don't know how to communicate with one another anymore, or having difficulty communicating with one another, even in your own family. even in your, amongst siblings or parents and children.
Why do you think that is? Why can't people talk to each other anymore?
Well, I think it's avoidance, because they may be oversaturated with other problems, and there are certain distractions that can take away, the time that you thought you were going to have with someone, and now all of a sudden that time isn't there anymore. And like one example of that is, and I'm sure both of you remember, a good portion of the United States used to get their news from the newspaper.
Yes.
And you would look at the newspaper, there'd be a ton of stories, and depending upon the newspaper you're reading, there may be editorials, there may be newspapers that, they're going to be light on the story. It's not going to be too in depth, or you could get one that's more in depth. But when you would read a newspaper, there might be advertisements on the page, but it would only be maybe one advertisement.
Right.
But if you go online now and you look for the news, there could be hundreds of advertisements while you're trying to read the news.
Yes.
And so, I'm thinking to myself that there are certain things that draw us away from being able to communicate properly. You're concentrating on one thing, and then now something else is kind of distracting you. And there's a lot to distract us nowadays. They want you to be a political expert. They want you to be, an international, relations, have full perspective on everything, and it's impossible to live a life like this. Like, no one can do that. And so sometimes I think we just need to step back and ask ourselves, well, what's important to us? Like, when you think about growing up, what your favorite films were, those things are probably still your favorites, and you're not ever going to let go of those. And, it's like, and perhaps maybe it's not, the saturation of films we're seeing today, but there was a reason why it meant something to you. And if you had to go on a desert island, maybe those are the ones you take with you.
Oh, for sure.
Even if you had to be at the expense of other films. And I think that the value of what is the most important to you shouldn't get, sort of overshadowed by, a lot of noise and, just being put this weight of information on your shoulders. So I think that being able to step away from certain things and focus on those important things, it's harder now to do that. It's really harder because people will say, well, did you see this? Did you see that? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, all right, let me just take a deep breath. Okay. How are you today?
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. Like, the problem that I have is that we don't have enough time to think about what we know. Yeah. Like, we hear these things and, like, you can't be contemplative. Like, you can't sit back and go, like, look, I had a paper route. Like, people are like, what? What's a paper route? So I delivered papers every day. I delivered the Seattle Times 7 days a week for a long time. I needed money because back then blank videotapes cost $30 a pop and no one would buy them.
Yeah,
from
they
me.
were pricey.
So I had a paper route. That's how I made money. It was one of my first jobs. But one of the reasons I got a paper route was I loved the newspaper. I loved it. I loved getting the newspaper. And I loved reading the calendar section. I loved reading the op-ed section. I loved reading kids. They used to have newspapers, and they were broken into sections. Section A or B or C, and the calendar section would be entertainment, and then they would have the political section and the sports section. It was amazing. And you would read about them. Well, one of the reasons I wanted a paper out was because I was the first person to see the paper. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I would read some op-ed, and then as I would walk around, I used to get caught because I would be reading someone's paper or something and I'd put it on there. You kept it folded up because nobody wants to open up a paper that's already been opened by some douchebag. So I would make sure, but still, I love the newspaper. I love news, and nowadays, it's all news has become entertainment. And I loved it that I thought news was entertaining despite being the news. And then they had to turn news into entertainment to pay for itself. And even CBS News, 60 Minutes, they operated at a deficit. Like CBS, the profits CBS made would cover the fact that their news division didn't make any money because they felt their news division was so important. like 60 Minutes expose, which I live for that shit. I watched 60 Minutes since I was a little kid. And I don't watch it much anymore because I don't have regular broadcast TV, really. I haven't looked at regular broadcast TV in 10 years. But I do like to look at 60 Minutes. Like, ooh, there's a 60 Minutes story online. And I just think that we live in a world now where intellectual inquisitiveness, which is what I felt since I was a little kid, has been sort of bled away. Like, nobody wants to... Like, this idea that everyone thinks they know everything. I'm like... That was the whole fun of it. Like, you didn't know enough. You got to find out more. And
maybe the difficulty in communication is because, and this is a bit of a reach, but when you don't have programs like after school specials, or episodes of your favorite science fiction stories that tell you you need to talk it out, or value relationships. Maybe when you're not seeing those as examples, if that's what you're looking towards, then perhaps it's not that important anymore to you.
No.
Perhaps.
By the way, Golt sends in a super chat and says, I'm watching live from Australia. Thanks for the show. Well, Golt, if I was with you right now, I'd have either a bottle of Penfolds wine or a sixer of Cooper's. Or if we're doing a little lowbrow action, we'd have a slab of vibe, mate. You know what that, and we would be drinking, and we'd be listening to a little Cold Chisel. I know he's probably like 16 going, Cold Chisel, what's that? It's a band. But we would be doing that, and man, do I miss Australia. I want to go back.
Yeah, I heard you talking the other day about it, and you were saying that you saw this film, one of the films. I mean, Dead Alive is like one of my favorite films, but that whole era you said in the 90s, there was another film. Is it called Body Melt? I think it's Body Melt.
It is. Oh, yes. That was an 80s. Okay. It's Exploitation.
Yes.
And so for those of you who don't know, Australia has you've got Peter Weir, who made movies like Picnic at Hanging Rock and The Last Wave, very erudite, upscale. Breaker Morant. There's a lot of, he didn't make that, but there's a lot of great Australian films. However, Australia has a long tradition of exploitation movies. A lot of people think Mad Max. True. There's a biker movie called Stone. Like, all of you go to YouTube right now and look up the trailer for Stone and tell me you don't want to watch it. Then there's movies like Wake in Fright. But in the 80s, they made a body horror movie called Body Melt. That is somewhere halfway between a cult comedy and a legitimate horror film. I'd never seen it. And when Elizabeth and I started dating like 6 years ago, I got a copy of Body Melt, and it was a horrible DVD that was actually just a rip off of a VHS tape, even though it was sold commercially. And I brought it over to her house, and I didn't know any better. We didn't really know each other. And I said, hi, Elizabeth, I brought over this Australian exploitation movie called Body Melt. I'd never seen it. And the combination of VHS quality with the movie itself, she's looking at me like, I've known her for like a month. She's like, what the hell is this shit? What are you making me watch? And I'm thinking, this is fucking awesome. And she's laughing at it. She's like, what is this garbage? And so then my beloved Vinegar Syndrome, a great home video label, released a beautiful piece of physical media. They released a great disc of Body Melt. And they went back to the original negative, and it's fucking awesome. And if you want a good time with Australian exploitation cinema, Body Melt is your movie. I don't know if Golt is happy. He's watching this show live in Australia now. But let me tell you, your fellow countrymen know how to make some wacky, zany films. So thank you for writing in and saying that.
Yes, Dead Alive will always be one of my favorites. So
that's New Zealand, though.
Oh.
It's New Zealand because it's Peter Jackson. You know, he did Bad Taste, which is his first movie. Then he did I think he did Meet the Feebles, and then he did Brain Dead or Dead Alive. You know, whichever you want to call it.
Right. I know it has a different name.
Yeah, it's amazing. By the way, James Lockman, sends in a tip and says, aloha, Rob. So James has said he's entered into the raffle to go to space, and he says he's going to take me with him. So James says, aloha, Rob. So they will announce the winner for the win 2 seats on one of the first Virgin Galactic flights to space around September 28th, just 4 days after my birthday. I am a man of my word, and I will take you if I win. I think Hot Toys should make figures of us. Well, James, maybe, but if we win, I will bring Hot Toys for both of us. We will take them into space, and then we'll bring them back, repack them, and sell them on the secondary market for thousands of dollars. They will be the only Hot Toys that have and by the way, we'll take video of them spinning around in zero gravity outside, so the window and the earth, so nobody can say we faked it. So thank you for that. Stubble McShave says Nicolas Cage has 108 acting credits.
Wow.
Just 173 more to reach Christopher Lee's number of 281 acting credits. James Lockman, who's going to take me to space, goes on and says, I've been watching HBO Max a lot lately. Mm-hmm. I just watched Oliver Stone's JFK on HBO Max. I love that film. I, too, love that film. It's beautifully made, by the way, and the editing is impeccable. Next, I'm going to watch The Right Stuff, bruh.
Yes.
Okay, that's top. The Right Stuff is one of my 10 favorite films of all time. It's a 3 hour and 15-minute film that feels like it's 2 hours. I love that movie. Mm-hmm. Another great film that came out when I was 13. It came out in 1983, same year as Return of the Jedi. I've also got Grand Canyon, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan. Great Steve Martin performance in that. And The Player lined up after that. The Player was directed by Robert Altman, based on the book by Michael Tolkien. One of my favorite Hollywood movies ever, The Player. It's so good. So good.
Yeah, I loved Grand Canyon. I thought that was
I did too.
Very introspective view of I guess Los Angeles, right, is where it mainly takes place.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. It's all about LA and race relations. It's like,
yes,
it's the good version of Crash that won the Academy Award.
Yes, and Alfred Woodard is in it, where she kind of meets, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but she kind of makes a love connection in it. And, it was a very interesting perspective. And I'll never forget the part where Kevin Kline, comes across
Danny Glover. Like when his car breaks down and stuff.
His car breaks down, and Danny Glover helps him because I guess Danny Glover is has a car, like a car,
a mechanic, a shop that he works for.
And and he helps him obviously, and then there's a confrontation. But there's like one part, I kind of felt like it was really one hand washing the other. There's a part where Danny Glover is speaking to Kevin Kline, and he talks about his sister. I think it's his sister.
Yeah.
Played by Alfred Woodard. I think no, it wasn't Alfred Woodard. It was another lady who plays the sister. And he says, my sister's, kind of having a tough time. And I'll never forget how Kevin Kline was like, well, why doesn't she move to this place? There's some available apartments. And I was like, this is about looking out for people in the community. This is about looking out for your fellow man. And, it's a feel good film. And then Danny Glover finds love in the story. It's really good. I thought.
No, I agree. It has a great score. I really like Grand Canyon a lot. And it's funny, it was one of those times where I watched, I hadn't seen that movie. I don't think I'd seen that movie since it came out. And I loved it. And then it was on, you find it on late night cable and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe, that this movie is actually, and then you turn it on and you forget, you're like, this is really compelling. And, Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote Empire Strikes Back and who wrote Return of the Jedi and who wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, he directed this film after directing like Body Heat and other films. I mean, it's
Big Chill.
Yes, and Big Chill, great stuff. And I really like that film. And it's funny, it's kind of forgotten.
It is kind of forgotten, but it really was a special film, and it dealt with, I mean, I guess dealing with gangs at the time is kind of was a hot, and still is a very, maybe not so much now, but was a very hot topic at the time.
Yeah, I mean the Crips and the Bloods were still. I mean that was early to mid '90s. I want to say it was like '95. Let's see. Let's use the newfangled contraption called the internet.
Yes, let's do
find
that.
out. I want to say it's 85. I mean 95. Grand Canyon came out in it's 91. I'm wrong.
Oh wow.
So yeah, L.A. gang problems were still, the Bloods and the Crips were still fighting, and there's a really tense scene where Kevin Kline's car breaks down in Inglewood, and things are bad, and he calls to get a tow truck, and Danny Glover shows up in a tow truck, and there is a gang confrontation. It's a pretty tense scene. Yeah, and it's funny because I moved to LA in '88, and coming from Seattle, we didn't have the kind of gangs or whatever. But I have to say, like I explored LA when I was here. I loved going to all different kinds of places. I have to say that my experience of Los Angeles, even in 88, 89, when gangs were around, and I would go to places that were not the greatest just to explore the city, I never had a bad experience ever. And I met a lot of really rough people. And it's all about, the one thing that I knew was you just have to approach people with respect. Mm-hmm. That's it. And for me, I generally, my default position is to like people. You know, I'm like, hey, how's it going? I just came down here. Never been here before. What's good? No, and literally all you have to do is ask people questions. Like, this is your neighborhood? Like, where do you go eat? Where's the best meal? And then people, they might look at you like you're crazy, but if you ask people questions and you actually make them, they have to believe you. You can't be full of shit. You have to genuinely be interested. You can't fake that. Right. But if you are, and then ask people where should I go, and what else should I know? And I found, for the most part, I mean, that's not to say I in Australia I got jumped by 4 guys and they beat the shit out of me. They broke my nose, cracked 3 ribs. Shit happens. But for the most part, I've had good experiences. And when I first moved to LA, 88, 89, 90, 91, all the way through the LA riots, I had pretty good experiences.
Well, you know,
it's LA.
It's very funny because Steve Martin also did another film around that time called L.A. Story.
Oh my! Which he directed.
Yes, and it paints a different picture. You know, obviously, you know, he wasn't the main. He was one of the. I guess maybe he was one of the ensemble cast in Grand Canyon that sort of like has this. It was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, because he gets shot in that movie.
Yes, and then it looks like he's going to change his life, and then all of a sudden, things kind of go back to normal. But then in L.A. Story, he paints a different picture, of another character around the same time period. Also, maybe not in entertainment, but as a weatherman, so to speak. And insecurities there. The insecurities of both of those characters, which I think was very interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's funny. Now you make me, I don't own that movie. Now I'm like.
You don't own L.A. Story?
I don't own L.A. Story, nor do I own Grand Canyon. And I don't know why. Patrick Stewart is in L.A. Story.
Yes, he plays,
the
I
maitre
guess,
he's so good, too. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great, it's funny. I don't know why I don't own is it on Blu-ray? Maybe it is. Now I need to, let's see, because the internet tells us a lot. Let's see, L.A. Story Blu-ray.
Now, Sarah Jessica Parker is also in that movie, and I think her performance was fantastic.
You know what? Oh wait, there is no L.A. Story. Wait, hang on. It's a Blu-ray. It's a Region B import.
Ooh.
Yeah, you cannot. It's not out. It's German. Maybe Dieter. I don't know if Dieter Bastian's in this chat, but Dieter Bastian. I need to get L.A. Story. It's wow. Isn't that crazy? Now let's see if I don't think there's a Grand Canyon Blu-ray either.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is. I just don't know it. Grand Canyon. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, that's Grand Canyon Adventure. Oh, there is. Okay, Grand Canyon. There is a Blu-ray. It is used. It doesn't look like it's Well, maybe it is. Hang on. Region is here. What region? It's Region 1. I'll have to look into that. Now I want to get it because of this. This is why I love these conversations, because you never know.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, I swear, like Morgan Creek or Kino Lorber or something like that released it, I thought.
Yeah, I need to get it. Do you have it? Do you have it, Tom?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I've seen it years ago. But yeah. No, I swear, though, I just recently saw like I said, Kino or Morgan Creek or not Morgan Creek, Mill Creek or one of those.
Yeah. You might be right about that.
Yeah.
By the way, Death Hawk in the chat says, laugh out loud. Everything needs to be Blu-ray for R&B to watch it now.
Well, Blu-ray,
Guilty
4K.
is charged.
Yep.
Come on, man. I want to see it looking good.
That's right. No excuses.
Oh, wait. Hang on. I've got to, wait. I got two questions. One I'm going to ask, but the second one, you guys are going to have to answer. Well, so Mus Hussein says, hi, Rob and Tom. Did you know there was almost a Lord of the Rings movie starring the Beatles and directed by Stanley Kubrick in the 60s? I did. Yes. That we've talked about that. Yes, I did. Mm-hmm. I'm glad it didn't happen. It might have been bad. Okay, Magic K. I've been avoiding this question all day, but now I can't. But Magic K says, "What's your opinion on Masters of the Universe revaluation?" A lot of people have issues with it, but I kind of like the show. First of all I can say is Masters of the Universe was I was a little old for it. And I will say this, the day that Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan opened, June 4th, 1982, I bought the original 6 Masters of the Universe figures before I got in line. It was He-Man, Skeletor, Man-at-Arms, Beastman, Teela, and Merman. I think that was the original 6. Mm-hmm. I bought those. I thought they were great because I'd never seen anything like them. I never, ever watched an episode of the show because I couldn't handle it. It was just so... I just said, I have the power. I did work on a He-Man documentary 10 years ago. So I learned all about it, and I did like I love the re-release of the Wind Raider or Wind Rider ship that He-Man rode. I followed it. I liked the Masters of the Universe feature film, but the He-Man cartoon means nothing to me, so I am not the person to ask about it. And for me, I have no idea. I just read a review of the He-Man series. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I was like, that's kind of fascinating. Where's it going to go in part 2? I don't know. But other than that, I have no strong opinion. So, Tom, would you care to weigh in?
Opinion on the show at all? I have nothing to say about it. I'm sure
that's
not Twitter,
true, sir.
Seen some of my reactions to this show.
Oh, I've actually... I know more about people's reactions to this new Masters of the Universe series than I know about the Masters of the Universe original show. I know more about the last 24 hours of reactions and people's feelings, but I feel I am not qualified to weigh in on them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll try to be as nice as possible. It looks great. A completely misused voice cast, unfortunately. that is great for the most part. But Lord Almighty, I grew up a huge He-Man fan, right? I was the right age for this shit.
Yeah, of course.
It was my first real introduction to, and like the short version of the story I tell is the truth is like, you know, I had the toys, but I didn't really have like a connection to anything because we didn't really have at that point yet any real, because He-Man was the first time they were allowed to make a cartoon that was connected to a toy like that. And for me to see my toy come to life on screen talking to me was insane, because at 3 years old, all I knew, or 3 or 4 years old, all I knew was Superman and Sesame Street, right?
Yep.
I didn't know nothing else, and Bugs Bunny maybe at the most, you know. Like to me, it was like insane to see that. So like I carried that with me for years and years and years. And sure, I moved on to other things, but He-Man was always something that would come back. And the 2002 series was amazing. I was always hoping for a great film, kind of loosely based on that kind of concept. And then when the show was announced, you know, I was like, okay, cool. It's supposed to be a sequel to the original. Well, then we find out that's not exactly true, but I'm going to get into all that diatribe because there is legal reasons for that. But we got a video coming on that. But the other side of it is I was a huge Kevin Smith fan. In fact, I found you probably through Kevin Smith in some roundabout way, to be honest with you.
Right.
Because in 1993, when Clerks came out, that movie blew my fucking mind. Like, I'm like, how can you do this? How can you make a movie? I didn't know you could do this. Like, to me, movies were these untangible things that cost millions of dollars to make, and you needed Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone or somebody like that to make. You couldn't make a movie with your buddies at where you worked. That idea just it blew my mind and opened my world to other things like Quentin Tarantino. And like I said, eventually I discovered, you know, like Free Enterprise and stuff like that. And you know, I was like, and at that point I was getting interested in directors and stuff like that. So I did pay attention to who Robert was. I'm like, yeah, this guy could be like the next Kevin Smith. You know, it's like, I did feel that way at the time when I saw
I've
it.
let you down now.
No, actually, you mean more to me than Kevin does at this point, because I don't know if you saw my clip for this earlier tonight on Friday Night Tights. He lost me. I've been a lifelong Kevin Smith fan, and I've even joked, but it's probably true. You know, you could probably trace back all the fans in the Midwest of Kevin Smith, and they probably all trace back to me like herpes, because there.
Wow.
And there's a reason why I say this is because there was a weekend when after Clerks came out that nobody I know had seen it, heard of it, knew anything about it. So over the weekend, my parents were gone, and you know how it is when your parents are gone. We had, I don't know, 6 or 7 wild fucking parties, but nobody had ever seen the movie Clerks or Friday. So on a loop all weekend long, we were watching Clerks and Friday, and I introduced all these people to Kevin Smith for the first time. And then when Mallrats came out, same thing. And then I was dragging people to the theaters to see these movies too, because I was in an area where you couldn't just go see a Kevin Smith movie. Like, I had to drive like 200 some miles to go see Dogma. It was damn near impossible to find it. Like, I was that invested in this guy. And I actually tore up my poster earlier from the premiere of Jay and Silent Bob reboot, because he had these digital, like, virtual premieres. And I was there. I was seeing it. And I actually stuck up for that movie, and I've stuck up for Kevin up until this. I'm like, maybe there's something we're missing here. Maybe he's right. Maybe it isn't all about Tila. You know, all these kind of things. And then when I realized he not only lied to me, but it was one of my heroes who lied to me.
Oh, no.
You know, it's like, okay, it was bad enough when he's a fucking shill. Now he's a sellout. He sold his soul for a paycheck. And it just, I can't get my head around it, right? Like, I can understand the CW shit. I can understand him shilling for Star Wars. I can understand him, you know, doing certain things. And I even was of this mind that there is 2 Kevin Smiths. There's the one that he presents out there as this happy, jovial nerd guy that's this kind of persona. And then there's the real Kevin Smith and how he feels, and he hides that in characters like Randall, right? Because there's lots of things I've heard him say that he'll turn around and put into characters like that in his movies. And it's like, okay, so maybe he doesn't really feel the way that he puts out there in this other persona. He's really the same person he always was. No, he's not anymore. He's not the same person anymore. He let this happen. And frankly, it's not so much that he wasn't a fan to begin with. It was just the lying part. Because, I mean, we talked a little bit about it before, but we've talked about it many times over. We brought up Nicholas Meyer. He's a great example. You don't have to be a fan to work on something and make it great.
Right.
but you need to be able to understand it. And Kevin Smith, and that's why I'm so disappointed, should get this stuff. He didn't have to say and tell us the bullshit that he was, years and years and years saying that he's not a fan, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I watched every single episode. You're lying through your teeth. You may have just watched it before you did the show, but I really don't think you understood what those characters meant to people. And a prime example is Orko, because he's sitting there saying, oh, like 75% of the people hated that character. I'm like, are you insane? Most people loved that character. In fact, in the original show, he was the POV character for the kids. He was the little kid who could never get anything right, who was always watching the adults do everything. He was our conduit into this world. Just like Orko, we knew Adam was He-Man. We knew all the secrets of Grayskull. We knew everything that everybody knew, but we couldn't always, just like a little kid, we can't always contribute. Orko was that character. And for him to sit there and say, oh, it didn't mean nothing. For me to kill him, it's going to make him mean that much more. It's like, no, you fundamentally do not understand these characters then. And then to sit there and say, oh, this show is all about He-Man, and to make it all about Teela is a lie. When you flat out sit there and try to call clown, and you punch down, no less, at somebody like Clownfish TV and try and act like you're high and mighty.
I am ignorant of this. I heard, I dipped in to Friday Night Tights tonight, and I watched a little bit of it, and I heard that did he go after Clownfish TV?
Yeah, he did, not once, but like twice. And he's even made some cracks on some of his recent after shows and other things that are directed at, and some of them I know have got to be, if they are who I think they are because of the way he mocked them, they're up and coming YouTubers. So they're not even people in the realm to where like, okay, yeah, you got to roll with the punches, right? You get to a point, you're going to get a lot of criticism.
Sure.
And sometimes you're going to stir up some bees. Sometimes you're going to get the actual people who are involved in this stuff who are going to say something to you. But when you're just somebody like that who, when you get somebody like Kevin Smith putting a huge fucking spotlight on you with the fandom that he has, I mean, it's you can't do that to people. He needs to realize the type of power that he wields. And when you do that kind of crap, it not only makes you look bad, and just to begin with, now that we know he's lied, he's never going to come out and apologize. He's never going to. He's already. That's the funny thing is Kevin was always one of those guys, and I'm sure you may have met him at least once, Robert, or something in passing.
I used to write for his movie Poop Shoot website.
There you go. So you know him. I mean, he just does not seem like this is the kind of guy who would do this kind of thing. He seems like the guy who understands fandom. And if you walked up and told him, look, you screwed this up, he'd like, you're right, I fucked it up. Because he'd be the kind of guy who used to shit on himself for Mallrats for years. But now he's out there trying to compare Masters of the Universe to the type of, stuff that Captain Marvel and stuff got going on. It's like not even close, dude, because Captain Marvel didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Right? We all knew what Captain Marvel was going into that. We all kind of knew what was going to happen to Star Wars. We knew what we were getting into with Star Trek to a point, and we definitely knew what we were getting into with Ghostbusters. At no point did they try to pretend that they were anything other than what they were trying to do with them. Terminator Dark Fate is another great example. This, on the other hand, Kevin Smith flat out came out and said, this is a sequel to the original series for the fans. It's a love letter to the fans. It's a love letter to He-Man, and he flat out lied to us. And I mean, I know some people enjoy it and that's great, but to me, you're being bamboozled by the shiny, veneer when really underneath it's just a bunch of crap. And it really is. There's so many things I could dive into that I'm not going to here because I'm trying not to go off on some rant and rave. So,
I don't know, dude. It's fucking metal. Wait, hang on. You can go off on a fucking metal.
Well, like I said,
hang loose.
I mean, I noticed your crowd's a little bit more.
This is more if you're a surfer and living in Hawaii.
The thing is I get it. Your crowd is a little bit more mixed as far as the reactions compared to some of the other ones. So I don't want to
look. Here's
piss everybody off.
But listen. I think your reaction. This is something I'd love to delve into, because I personally have no attachment to He-Man at all. I did work on this documentary that is still unreleased called Toy Masters. They dealt with a lot of this in the Toys That Made Us, but before that, we did play the documentary at Fantasia. I went up to Canada and showed it. So I learned about He-Man. But here's one of the things that I have learned. Here's what I've learned about He-Man. this was definitely a point in time. It was not my point in time, so there was no way. I was a little too old for it. But the people that loved He-Man really loved He-Man. I mean, it was a seminal point in people's lives. And I look at it as the same way Star Trek was for me or The Twilight Zone. Everybody's got their thing. And it depends when you grew up. And there's a sweet spot. And that's what fandom is all about. And that's what... and what happens is decades go by and they look at these IPs and they want to keep them going. And what is never understood is the people that love these IPs, whenever you're going to address them, you need to understand when they came out, what was happening around the time they came out, and why did people love them at that time. And when you try and apply what's going on now, socially, culturally, entertainment-wise, and you're like, we're going to take today's sensibilities and we're going to recreate this thing that people loved 40 years ago almost, it doesn't work. Because the thing that made this thing lovable or whatever people liked, the zeitgeist, it's not the same as it was 40 years ago. And unless you understand what it was that made your audience love this as long ago as it was, you're never going to be able to recreate it today because you're not addressing the real issue, which is it's not just, okay, you can look at the characters and the milieu and all that, but it's also the time and it's everything else that was going on around that show. And what were kids like or what were people like that love those shows? You need to understand psychology. You need to understand history. You can't just look at the show and then recreate it and expect it to work. And what I find so frustrating now is with these franchises, everybody is trying to bring this modern sensibility to update these things. And that way lies death. That's killed Star Trek. And from what I've understood, I mean, from my perspective, from what I've read, I'm like, well, the story sounds to me interesting, but that's because I'm not a fan of that franchise. And the real question is, if you're going to bring back He-Man and Skeletor, that's the center of the franchise. It's He-Man and Skeletor. It's that conflict. It's two sides of the sword. I have the power. If you're getting rid of them for whatever reason, and someone's being relegated and banished to heaven and hell and whatever the fuck they did in this show, because I don't know. I've just gleaned what I'm like, if you get rid of Skeletor and He-Man, you've gotten rid of the show.
Right.
I mean, it's gone. And look, you can tell some story and have Tila and Evil Lynn or whatever the fuck is going on. I don't know. I just know the action figures from 40 years ago, 39 years ago. That's all I know. I mean, and I liked man-y faces, and I bought more than just the 6. I had them. I thought they were cool figures. Never watched the show. I liked the Wind Rider, and then when they redid it, it was really cool too. But you cannot do a He-Man show. It's called fucking, and I noticed the show's called Masters of the Universe. It's not called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And the thing is, at the end of the day, your fans, the very people watching the show, want to see He-Man and Skeletor. That's it. That's what they want to see. Everyone else is inconsequential. Orko, that's great.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you want to see fucking He-Man and Skeletor and update it. Do whatever the fuck you want. But don't get rid of them and relegate them to heaven and hell and put them in a scepter and magic, whatever the fuck. You got to have your main characters.
Well, and this suffers from the exact same problem that Star Trek and everything else does.
Yes.
You have a situation where it was, regardless of the fact that it's He-Man is your main character, and that's even become a shorthand for somebody who's like a macho man. The fact that even though you have that as a main character, Tila was always somebody that was a character that was already strong. She was already a strong
and one of the original 6 figures.
Yes. And same thing with Evelyn, and same thing with the sorceress, and same thing with most every other female character that's been involved with the show. So what you have is you already have a situation where it was already quite diverse, because there wasn't just even quote unquote white people, because let's face it, it's an alien planet with a bunch of different creatures to begin with. But you have a situation where you could do a lot of the things that would speak to this generation's politics and their sensibilities. But what you did instead was just do your self-indulgent, like the same kind of crap they did with all these other shows. Push the female power empowerment to the forefront where it already was enough. So you've amped it up to 11. And in the process, you've neglected all the male characters and or made them subservient or even apologetic in places they shouldn't have been. Two of the greatest examples is when Duncan is apologizing to Tila when she was the one acting like a fucking teenager and making the death of He-Man and Adam all about her. And then she does it again when they're in their version of heaven called Preternia, and she's sitting there arguing with Adam, and he's like, "I'm dead, Tila," and she's like, "Yeah," and we were left to deal with that. And it's like, do you fucking listen to yourself right now? It's like, did the writers actually, because I'm listening to this on the show and I'm like, I know Kevin Smith may not have necessarily wrote this specific episode. He did write the first episode, that I know for sure. But you go watch that scene in Chasing Amy between Ben Affleck and Joey Lauren Adams in the fucking SUV. And then you watch that scene between He-Man and Tila. And it is a world of difference. It's like, where did this guy go? He was arguably one of the best dialogue writers in Hollywood. And you watch that scene still to this day. I say, if maybe not the movie holds up, that fucking scene holds up because you feel the intenseness between those two characters at that moment. And there's none of that here. The dialogue is flat. The characters are trash. Most of them are afterthoughts except for Tila. She's pushed to the forefront with her basically like her twin sister who just happens to be black. She's the same exact fucking character. There's no difference between the two of them. And this ain't even Tila anymore. See, that's the thing, is Tila would not have reacted the way she did. King Randor wouldn't have reacted the way he did. There's a lot of problems with the reactions of characters, and it's like, if you understood these characters fundamentally, they would not have acted this way. And then you have a situation where you lose your main character, like you said, and you don't even have a fucking funeral for him.
Right.
There's all these things, and it's just like Star Wars all over again. We lost Han Solo. We didn't even get to mourn him. And you can sit there and argue that the whole show is leading up to getting He-Man back. But you know what that reminds me of? Jason Goes to Hell. And I'm sure that's the way Kevin Smith walked in when he proposed this thing. He's like, I got it, guys. We're going to kill He-Man in the first 5 minutes so that you're waiting the whole show. And when he shows up, everybody's going to be like, yay, He-Man. And he didn't stop to think that everybody through the entire fucking movie of Jason Goes to Hell is going, wait, you just killed Jason in the first 5 minutes. Where's Jason? Where's Jason? Where's Jason? For the next fucking hour. And then going back to my initial point about Orko too, is like, he doesn't understand the characters. He says only over 75% of the people hated him. Then what is the number one gripe of the 1987 film? The number one gripe is, where the fuck is Orko?
Yeah, that's right.
Instead we got Gwildor. You know, like, again.
Yeah, so which I never understood, by the way.
Exactly.
Even I was like, wait, who, what?
Nobody really cared about Battle Cat. We all understood you're not going to be able to paint a tiger green, folks. You know, we could accept that, but it's like, you can't make us a little floaty guy, you know? Like,
okay, hang on. So Just Plain Steve sends in a dissenting view. He says, I have to disagree. The show is great. It wasn't a He-Man show. It wasn't a Tila show. It was a show about Eternia and the characters that live there. And then he goes on to say, I watched all the shows as a kid. I was the perfect age. I'm as big a fan as anyone, and this felt like a great evolution of the show and the characters. Duncan was great. All of the characters were. What do you think about what Just Plain Steve has to say?
I don't know how old he is or what experience he has with He-Man, so I can't really speak to that. But hey, you know, everybody's entitled to their own feelings on it. I can't help but feel like some people, even my good friends that I've talked to about this, aren't a bit bamboozled by this shiny veneer. Because this looks like the series we always wanted. And I said this
I
morning
think
with
the
Andre.
anime. I haven't watched the show, but the trailer,
Yeah.
I was like, this looks fucking rad.
It looks fantastic. Like and Andre and I agreed 110%. We're like, if you took the storyline from the 2002 series, which we both agreed was way overly designed, like it's just too much design on it. It's overkill. But you took that storyline and you set it up with
no
these
Dota
characters.
Dragon's Blood.
No, not in the least. No.
Just saying.
No, I gotta at least stroke your ego a little there.
I
But
know,
no, like
no, don't
if
do
they
it. It's
just took
Studio
that
Mirror.
storyline,
It's Studio Mirror.
just made it look like the old toys, we would have been happy with that. You didn't even have to give us a sequel story. But at the same time, there's a story to be told with Tila, and we're just dragging it out. And it's just so stupid the way they're doing it. And again, I'm not saying it's so much like, okay, it'd be different if it'd be like, yeah, I just didn't agree with it. I'd do it differently. But there's the other problems. The other problems are basically the big FUs to the fans. It's like, you said this was for the fans. You made this for the fans. Why is this something that is obviously made to pull in an audience that does not care about Masters of the Universe?
Mhm.
That's what I'm bothered by.
Well, that's what everybody. I think you just nailed this idea that everyone's trying to turn their IPs into something that isn't what the fans like. Like I don't understand it. Like, let's take this IP that's been around for 50 years or 40 years. I mean, He-Man's been around for what, 38 years? 82, 83, 84.
Almost 40, yes.
So let's change it into something else. And I don't get that. Like, to me, like if someone walked up to me and said, like, Rob, we're going to make a new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe show. We want you to run it. And I'd be like, I don't know fuck all about the show but I would say this. My first, here'd be my pitch. You have 2 seconds, you have 10 seconds to come up with a pitch.
Right.
My pitch would be, He-Man and Skeletor have been locked in Mortal Kombat for 40 years. So 40 years have passed in Eternia. The swords have not been joined together. Where are they at now? The conflict has been going on. Why? And how do they feel about it? And where are they at now? And I'd be like, that's what I would want to see. How does Skeletor and He-Man, still battling over the soul of Eternia, where are they at now that this battle's gone on for 40 fucking years and it's not over yet? And we're going to find out how it's going to come to an end. And I'd be like, that's what people want to see? Like, let's see that shit. Let's see how Skeletor and He-Man or Prince Adam or whatever, they've been fighting for 40 fucking years and the world has changed, but whatever. That's what people want to see. Give me Skeletor.
That's kind of what we were promised.
Yeah, and I'm like, how is that not understood? Like, I don't get, like, you're working in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. That franchise is about Skeletor and He-Man going mano a mano. They got two sides of the same sword. That's it. I mean, that's what it's got to be. I mean, I understand you want to reinvent it. I have no problem telling stories and including women because now girls are as much imagination connoisseurs as men are. Like, look, man, I really wish when I first went to Comic-Con in 1988 that there were girls there the same way there were guys. There weren't. You know, it wasn't until 1994 where I met a woman came up to me and I was like blown. I'm like, wow. But that took me, I moved to LA 6 years before I talked to a girl at Comic-Con. It was amazing. But I don't understand.
There was girls at Comic-Con?
Dude, there were.
I'm being facetious.
I know, but it took a long time. Not when I first went to Comic-Con in 88, no girls. Zero. It was old guys and me, a young guy, rifling through long boxes. That was it. It was like, you know, talking about zombified. It was like, oh my God. And why would girls want to do that? I mean, I'm sorry not to be sexist, but I don't think any girls need to have the experience of rifling through long boxes at a comic convention. I just don't think they're going to want to do that. You know, like girls would know what comics they wanted to buy. They didn't have to rifle through long boxes. They'd be like, I would like the entire run of ElfQuest, please, or I want the entire run of, I want Frank Miller's Ronin, and I want the original versions, and they would go in and buy them. They're not going to be like, I don't know what comics I want. Let me rifle through these long boxes that how many guys have already been through here? I mean, my God, talk about sloppy seconds. Long boxes are like sloppy tenths. Horrible. Horrible. But where were we? He-Man.
Yeah. It's when you go onto Netflix to see the advertisements for Masters of the Universe, and I did mention this earlier, the first thing that you see is a picture of He-Man. And so, it implies, or at least to me, it implied that, it was primarily going to be about He-Man. And I was fine with that because that's what I've known. And I'm completely, if they chose to make it about another character and they had a picture of that character, I probably would have been okay with that as well. But, as soon as you start watching it, that first episode, it's jarring because I always remember Tila and all of the female characters, whether they're good or bad, they just looked great and they were very elegant. They had respect for themselves and for others. And, it was her reaction, which I kind of jokingly said, is this a Masters of the Universe or The Grudge? Because, her reaction was not what Tila would have done. Tila loved that character. I don't want to be too much of a spoiler, but, she loved this person and she would have been devastated. This was would have ripped her heart out as far as I'm concerned. And she probably loved him very much. I mean, I don't know whether it was a romantic relationship, but the point is that for someone that you're so close to, your reaction would be quite different. And, you wouldn't turn your back on everybody at a point like that. You would be reaching out, for someone to console you. And this might have been just a theme that could have been explored maybe at the end of series 1, rather than have it like right from the beginning. It was just, a shock to me. And I just don't think she would do that. I think that she would, kind of say, how are we going to make this right? We have to make this right. We have to. And there was no message. This is one of those, just like G.I. Joe, at the end of the show, each and every single episode, there's a, sometimes, you get upset about things. And, the best thing to do is to talk to, your parents or something like that.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out, and maybe someone sees a message in it, but is the message that, you just hold a grudge for a long time and, or decide you're not going to, speak to everybody you grew up with. Like it just doesn't seem right to me, but, it was not an event in the story that would justify that type of action. So, they were not mean to her at all. Like there was some, I understand everybody gets left out of the loop sometimes. This is not, especially in families, this is not new. I don't want to tell so-and-so because it might upset her, or she's having such a great day, let's not let her know. Or we've all seen this. We've all seen that sort of thing. So this shouldn't have been so upsetting that for the character that she just checks out. And
there's another way they could have done it too, to where she still had this type of reaction, but it wasn't to the things that happened. And that could have been like, look, it could have been her father going, now that all this crap's happened, He-Man's gone, the sorceress is dying, there's no power left, their magic's gone or whatever. You are the key to all of this. You need to take your place. And what if she turns around and rejects that?
Yeah, and she could have actually like shown an emotion like where she's just really scared to do this.
Exactly.
Now,
wait, I gotta say, Just Plain Steve, who's I have to say has great opinions and interesting things to say. Just Plain Steve writes in and says, because he's a fan of the show, he says, I respect everyone's opinions, and Masters of the Universe is going to hit everyone differently.
Yes.
But I feel like the people most disappointed had expectations that didn't get stroked. Agree to disagree? I'm 43, by the way. Now wait. I have to say that Steve brings up something that I personally grapple with a lot, and I'm always asking myself, and I do it with Star Trek, and I'm like, my question is, are my expectations, am I damned or am I doomed because I expect Star Trek to be a certain way, so I am not open to what Star Trek is, and I am missing out on its greatness? Oh, I can't believe I just said that. But am I, and is it me? And I wonder, because some people do like it, and I, like Just Plain Steve, I want to look at new stories and be like, okay, this story has subverted my expectations. This wouldn't be the story that I would tell. But I've always believed that I could recognize if a story is good or not. It might not be the story I wanted to see, but I would like to believe that I still can recognize a story, and it's not the way I want it to be, it's not the way I remembered it, but a good story is a good story. And I think a good story is self-evident. Especially if you're working a franchise, you can subvert expectations all you want. But if it's good and well thought out, your audience is going to go with you. Mm-hmm. Star Trek Discovery, modern Star Trek, the problem is they deposed a showrunner and then they Frankensteined his original concepts. So Star Trek Discovery, first of all, is dumb and stupid. But in addition to that, it is a bastardized version of one man's vision that has been reanimated by people that never understood it in the first place. And then they decided, oh, wait, we already fucked up for 2 years, so let's go to the 32nd century and we'll start from scratch. But that proved you fucking writers don't know what the fuck you're doing, even when you take away canon, because, oh, wait, let's bring the Guardian of Forever into the 32nd century. And I'm like, how do you guys, like, are you stupid? And when I hear you talk about Masters of the Universe, I wonder to myself, I'm like, even I know that Masters of the Universe is about He-Man and Skeletor's conflict. And the idea that, like, why are you sending them to hell and heaven? The Preternia? I mean, come on, man. Preternia?
Yeah. I was going to say that, I'm not going to go ahead and say whether I think someone's ego is stroked or not. You're going to, sometimes you like certain things and sometimes you dislike them. And I have no authority to tell anybody what they should like or dislike.
Nor should you.
And this is the reason why we're individuals, is because we're all different and we need to celebrate those differences. I'm very happy for people who liked it. I, sympathize with people who didn't care for it. And no matter what the IP is, there's going to be people who are going to care for it or not care for it. So that's just a reality of, existing and being a human being. So,
yes.
Whether or not someone thinks that you have to explain the reason why someone likes something or dislikes something, it doesn't really mean anything, because I don't believe in having to try to explain why I think someone else didn't care for something. I respect their opinion, and that's okay to have those opinions. So that's my answer to his question, or whoever wrote that.
Well, no, look. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to say, actually, I agree with both your responses to that for the most part. I'm kind of more like with you, Robert. Like, I fundamentally know well enough about a movie, or at least I've seen more than enough films, and a fan of, and at least a somewhat fan of enough franchises to where I can look at it objectively and subjectively and say, look, is this what I would necessarily do? No. But there's plenty of times where there isn't something I would necessarily do where it still works out. And there's even situations where it's not, it's the opposite, where I brought up Jason Goes to Hell before. Look, do I think it's a very good movie? No. But one thing I can say about Adam Marcus, though, is he took a fucking chance. He did take a chance. He tried something different. One thing he did say that I have to agree with him is we've had 8 fucking movies, basically, where Jason or whoever has stalked teenagers in a fucking woods for 90 minutes, right? So he tried something a little bit different. You can't fault somebody. Do I fault Kevin Smith and everybody else involved for trying something a little different? Not at all. Not at all. The way it was executed is the problem. Not just that, it's the way it was presented and packaged. And it's very much like, the analogy I like to use is, it's when you go in and you think you're walking into a steakhouse, you order a prime rib, and they bring you out a slab of hamburger. And you're like, this isn't what I ordered. And you're like, oh yeah, but that's a prime rib. And like, no, it's not. It's hamburger. I paid for prime rib. I want prime rib. It's like, well, it's still beef. You know, it's
well,
like,
but I think you're right. I mean, what's interesting is that He-Man has a built-in audience. There's a whole generation of people that grew up with it that were excited for the show. Like the way even I had no interest in this. I watched the trailers. I'm like, the animation's very cool, and it looked good to me, and so they had everybody, but the writers knew what they were doing. They knew. I mean,
that's
animation.
My point exactly.
I mean, I've worked on Dota Dragon's Blood. I've worked on it for since 2019. You know, and I'm working on season 2 now. I mean, I've worked on it for 2 years, and we're on season 2, the second of 16 episodes. Hopefully, we'll get a season 3. But it's not like this stuff isn't thought about. Like they have a long lead time. They didn't just whip this up last week, and they're thinking about it. And it's like you have to make decisions about what you're doing. And what I find so strange is these IPs that people work on have, whether it's Doctor Who, Star Trek, or Star Wars, or now Masters of the Universe, these are not things that are new or they haven't gone away. The reason that they're getting rebooted is because they already have a fan base.
Exactly, yes.
And what I don't get is what corporate decision makers think that, well, we're going to reinvent this franchise for a new audience. What new audience? The universe that exists. I mean, girls are finding rich dudes on Instagram, and the audience is not the same, man. The world is totally different. The He-Man that you made in 1982, 83, 84, whatever, has nothing to do with the world today. And then you're like, well, we're gonna make He-Man just like a world today. I'm like, no, then it's not He-Man anymore. You know, you might as well like say an Eternia, give him technology. Smartphones are big now. Tila is swiping right. You know, I mean, it's like, how far are you going to go? Why do you want to change? If you decide you're going to go all in on a franchise, and they've tried to reinvent Masters of the Universe for 40 fucking years. It never works. It's never as good as it was when it first came out with the purity of those 6 figures.
Yeah.
You know, actually, I want to say that Merman was not. I want to say it was.
No, I think it was Triclops, actually.
No, it wasn't. I want to say it's Stratos. It's the guy that had the wings on his arms.
Was it Stratos?
I think it was. I think Stratos was one of the first 6 original figures because he was gray and blue and he had the wings. You know what? I'm going to use the newfangled contraption.
I'm actually kind of ahead of you, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, tell me, what were the first? Just saying.
I'm with the first, but the other thing I wanted to say, and I've neglected to say it, is that you know, none of us want to live in an echo chamber. Like I really enjoy actually when people send in you know, their opinions and they're not the same.
Me too.
Because, you know, it becomes, you know, just an unrealistic you know, fantasy that, you know, we're not going to hear differing opinions. Like this is it, that world does not exist. So I love when people do send in stuff like that. And, you know, it's just, to me, it's just something you learn more and you're including people. This is about a community. We want to have unique thoughts and include others. And that's part of it.
By the way, I am wrong. It wasn't 6.
It was 7.
Was 8.
Or 8, yeah.
It was 8. It was He-Man, Man-at-Arms, Stratos, Tila, Beastman, Merman, Skeletor, and Zodak.
Yep.
Oh.
You know, and those are the ones I bought. Those are the first ones. It says they were out in 81. I didn't get them till June of 82. That was the first time I saw them. But yeah, that's why I'm confused because
I got 82 here, but yeah.
Yeah, that was I guess I bought all 8 of them. And you know what? Stratos was what I was thinking, but yeah, man.
Yeah, the other things that came in that first line would have been, I believe, Battle Cat, Panther.
But when I got those things, I didn't see those yet. But you know what? I'm looking at these.
Track,
I had the first 8. It wasn't 6. It was 8.
Yep.
Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah, but it's 8.
5, 6. It was 8. I bought them all on June 4th, 1982. And as I look at them, I'm like, yes, I bought all of these.
Because it was 3 good guys, 3 bad guys, and Stratos, who was neutral.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Tila.
Yeah.
Those are the first, and those are the figures I had. Those are the ones I bought.
And then Evelyn and the rest come Triclops and Trap.
Yeah, they came later, and they came out 2 years later.
Well, that first line, like that's the thing is when He-Man came out, it was like the biggest toy line ever for the longest time.
It's funny because I mean, now that I'm looking at this, I can tell you, I never had any of the other. I didn't have Battle Cat, Screech, Ram Man, but I did have Ram Man, Manny Faces, Evelyn, Faker, Trapjaw, and Triclops. That was it. Those are the end of my. That was the end of my.
I think Manny Faces was the one that came. I think Manny Faces and Triclops came out in between there. Like I remember getting those.
Manny Faces was dope. I loved it.
Because they would bring them out in like waves every year, but like it was There was the one year that sucked because all they had was the Bumblebee character for the new one. That's all I remember.
Norwegian Kryptonian sends in a super chat and says, "Imagine pitching the idea of He-Man today, a huge bloke in hairy underpants protecting the ultimate power of the universe with a sword, riding a tiger." Well, Norwegian Kryptonian, if someone pitched that to me, I'd be like, fuck yeah, let's do that shit. Come on.
It sounds fabulous.
Awesome. I know. I love it. James Lockman, who's taking me to space, by the way, if he wins. Grand Canyon is not even available on iTunes or Prime. I've been checking for the past few years, and I've only found a used copy online, but no new copies. I must have watched it on Hulu or something. I did watch it online not too long ago. And James goes on to say, one movie I need to pick up on DVD is Lady in a Cage, starring Olivia de Havilland and James Caan. I accidentally stumbled on it watching it on TV at 2 a.m. back in the 80s when I was in high school. And I was glued to the TV watching this lady trapped in her home. James, I love women trapped in her home. That's a subgenre of film I love, so I'd watch that. I don't know that movie. But you know what? Maybe when we go into space, bring the DVD. Because we'll watch it. So
there's 2 left in stock right now, but that's an import. For the U.S. version, for some reason, it's out of print.
Yeah,
They're
I know,
like
dude.
$70, $80. What the hell?
You know what? Fuck that. Let's give a Silver Sphere.
You know, I'm not kidding, dude. Like one of these days, we should just start like a fucking like a DVD boutique company, man.
You know what? I prefer 4K or Blu-ray, but I'll start it.
You know what I mean?
I know we should.
I said, did I say DVD? I meant Blu-ray, but you know what I mean.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean,
it's all about preserving the films, is the point. But yeah.
By the way, I was gonna wait till Sunday. Did you get this?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
Oh my God! The first new transfer, not perfect, but
the only new movie I got this week, I think, was what the hell was it? No, I was gonna say Almost Famous, but I got that last week.
yeah, I haven't got that. Emma Bannon sent it to me. By the way, I owe her money for it. I was trying to ship her money, and I transfer money, and I couldn't.
What did I get this week? I can't even
Not
remember.
because I don't have the money.
Oh, Class of 1984 finally got here, but yeah.
Oh, nice. There's a
That's
lot
not
of
a
good
new
stuff
one.
coming out. Next week is a big week.
I saw
Big
that.
week for
Yeah.
physical media. You know, I'm all over that. Dead Zone's coming out. All kinds of
I
stuff.
got a lot of the other stuff though, but like this last week wasn't much. I know that, but like because the week before I got like Howard the Duck, I got Space Jam, I got Almost Famous, and
Yeah, I haven't got
bunch
my
of them,
Almost
yeah.
Famous yet. Norwegian
looks good.
Kryptonian. Oh, I dude, it's one of my top 10 favorite films of
It's
all
a
time.
beautiful film, beautiful.
I like the extended version. Norwegian Kryptonian says the god awful truth about He-Man is that he never really survived the 1980s. Wow, that's I think a very astute statement.
Technically, you're right.
By
Until
the way,
resurgence here.
yeah. By the way, he loves the show and the channel, Rob. Well, Norwegian Kryptonian, you know, a lot of people have been offering me compliments this week, which is good because sometimes you get I feel full of despair. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. But a lot of people have written some very nice things, and I really appreciate that because you never know. When you do YouTube, I'm talking into a green light. and you like it's funny because if the green light doesn't work, it maybe is a red light. So you're living in a binary lifestyle. Either the green light is on and maybe people hear you, or you're fucked. And so the fact that you connect with people, because I'm sitting in a room, by the way, this room is full of awesome shit, but there's no one here to share it with me. And no one would care.
Right.
Nobody I know, they don't care. They're like, I'm like, did you see my new Eagle transporters? They're awesome. People are like, what? Nobody cares. Liz was like, those look like bugs. Why do you want more? I'm like, you can never have enough. She's like, why? And I'm like, well, in 1976 and 77. And she's like, I wasn't born. Like, well, then never mind. What can I say? So that's what it's like. I talk into a green light. So when someone likes the show, thank you. But I think Norwegian. Now, let me ask you this, Tom. You just said that He-Man never did make it out of the 80s, and they've tried. There have been so many different He-Man iterations that they've tried. I mean, I think the closest, like Mondo, when they were doing their big figures, or the collectors, that collector's version of He-Man stuff over the last 10 years is pretty dope, right?
I'd say, yeah, the last few years between the Super 7, the new Origins line, some of the other stuff that's come out, it's had a bit of a resurgence.
Yeah.
Of course, there was the 90s series that was a sequel to the original series, but only in story, I guess, not in actually aesthetics or design. And some people like that. I wasn't a big fan. The one I am a big fan of is the 2000 series. That was very well done, but it was canceled way too early. Again, a little over-designed, but great fucking story. Like, if they would just borrow from that for the story for a movie, I would be in heaven. That's what Andre and I were saying. If they just redid that with these designs, we'd have been in heaven. Because that was one of the best versions of He-Man to date as far as story-wise, having the most lore built in. But now we're caught in this randomness of, the show technically can't be a sequel to that Filmation series because that's sitting over at Universal because Mattel made some stupid deal back in the 90s. And actually, I'm kind of happy now because Mattel's behind this series. That in about a year and a half, the rights are all going to revert back to Universal. She-Ra's already over there. That's why technically they don't exist in the same world. The only way they exist right now is the bridge with the evil horde. It's like one of those deals like with Fox and Disney when they had the separation. They could use certain characters the same, but other ones they couldn't. But
well, see, to me, that's part of the problem of the modern age. The bifurcation of various characters, the things you can't talk about, the fact that the Marvel universe, you can't use the Namor was owned by, or the Hulk is owned by Universal, and Spider-Man is owned by Sony. I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is the audience. Your audience should always be the people that you think about first because they're the ones that are paying for the movies that you're making. And so what nowadays Fandom just expects people, or Sony just expects people to understand that, yes, we're releasing Spider-Man No Way Home. We'll put out a trailer when we want. There's no reason to do that. People don't get that Disney doesn't own Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is in the MCU, but they don't control Spider-Man's destiny. And I hate that. I hate that we live in a world where those old deals, it's like, you know what? Marvel's very successful. Just give them back Spider-Man. I know no one will do that, but ultimately it just sucks that as our fandoms are bifurcated or I hate
what's
it.
even funny about Marvel?
It.
His script doctor was telling me this. I don't know if he's still in the chat. He was earlier. But I guess there's like some deal. The way it works out is actually Disney doesn't technically own Marvel. What is this like really like exclusive distribution deal is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like this, it's like this funky deal where they own certain stock in Marvel, but they don't actually technically own the company. It's like this weird deal, like because like he was explaining to me, like Marvel could actually take any of these characters and go off and make a movie with them anywhere they want, but the deal is so ironclad with Disney that either they can't in certain cases, or if they did, it would risk their their deal with this. Like, it's just some messed up thing. So it's like Disney doesn't even really technically own them, but they're just so controlling over it, is what I guess is I've heard. And
Well, yeah.
I don't even know how, again, it just goes with your, the bifurcation. We saw the same thing with Star Trek when it was separated. That's the same thing we're seeing with Masters of the Universe and a lot of these other, properties. And most people don't even realize, like even Mission Impossible fell underneath that whole separation deal with Star Trek.
Right.
We just didn't notice because the movies happened to fall in a way that the first film that actually had any connection with the old series was still under the same umbrella. The separation happened after. And then, so the latter films, it didn't fucking matter at that point. But so nobody noticed. But now, it's still this weird thing. And why they would ever do something like that is beyond me. But hey, it happens. And I agree. I think, honestly, I don't even know why Marvel just hasn't ponied up and just bought the rights back at this point. Mm-hmm. It would make more sense. They own everything else. Sony is hanging on to just the distribution rights, basically, at this point. Outside of that, they really own very little of the character. They don't have any of the merchandising rights anymore.
No, but I mean, in terms of movie making, they make $1 billion a film, right. And they can say, "Look what it's all." But you're right. I mean, what's strange is ultimately what should matter is the audience. Does the audience embrace this kind of thing? And even with Star Trek, like I hated Star Trek Lower Decks because it's the Star Trek parody show, and when you get to parody, you're at the end of the road of a franchise. And then I watched Prodigy, the Prodigy trailer, and I'm like, I want to love Prodigy, but Star Trek is about humanity. At its core, Star Trek is about humanity moving out amongst the stars. And Prodigy is a show that's set in presumably the Star Trek universe. It's not about humanity at all. And I find that odd. And while I like the people that worked on the show and I hope it's good, at the end of the day, I'm like, why are you diluting? Like, Star Trek is about one thing. It's about future humans that have overcome their problems, moving out into the cosmos, and basically taming the infinitude of the universe using humanity's enlightenment. And that is inherently, I think, uplifting. Star Trek is not about all the rest of the aliens that live in the Star Trek universe. And Prodigy is a show that's exactly what it is. That Star Trek exists, and we're going to talk about people that aren't human beings. And to me, that is antithetical to what the Star Trek franchise is all about. When you take away humanity from Star Trek, it's no longer Star Trek. So why call it that? To tread on the IP? Well, you're ultimately going to lose. Maybe Lower Decks Prodigy will be great, but I don't think so. I hope it is. But why are you doing that to the Star Trek franchise? I don't know.
Robert, I think there's another super chat.
There's a couple actually. What I didn't get to was James Lockman, who is taking me to space. By the way, has a few. I already said he can't find Grand Canyon, but he did say one movie I need to pick up on DVD is Lady in a Cage. Oh, I already said that, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yeah,
I did. Sorry, that's not the one I missed.
I do have to correct myself, though. I believe what Script was talking about was from 2012 to 2015. In 2015, Disney acquired all of Marvel at that point.
Yeah.
Oh.
So no, okay. You're talking about. Hang on, I have missed some. So Baruz Herulev sends in a super chat and says, I hope physical media makes a comeback, or at least stay in business. I hate paying for something that is invisible. Essentially, it's Black Mirror. Look, I'm looking over at you. I can't see because it's on the other side of the wall. But buying a movie and owning it, like this to me is one of the great visual films of all time. And this has never looked very good on physical media. This is a new transfer. It looks fantastic. I actually called Bill Hunt tonight, and I was like, have you looked at the new Ron transfer? It looks fantastic. And what to me is buying physical media, it's like being a patron of the arts. You know, when you're collecting movies, you're curating your own museum, the Museum of Baruz. That's your museum. And when you have films, these are the films you deem worthy to hang on the walls of your museum or your
Well, I look at
memory
more of a
palace.
library, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's what library. But I think when you're curating, libraries have tens of thousands of books, and even if you've got hundreds of movies, it's still it's unique to you, and your collection of movies has something.
I think
to
I'm
say
catching up with you, Rob.
Dude, I told you. I said like my end. I wanted to be done with. I think I have about 3,500 discs.
Yeah,
I want to say 2,500 movies, curating that, and I'm over that. But I keep buying new things. But I will say this:
I'm getting
like
close to
this is a replacement. You know, I have, and then I love taking old movies or old version out, taking them out and putting something new in. By the way, this disc is chock-a-block full of special features.
Oh, that's another thing I love is when they actually go out of their way anymore, because that's something they don't do. And I still want to have that conversation with you, Robert, about how, you know, things have changed in the industry. And I know tonight's not the time for that, but yeah. No, I really
still
wish
need to do it.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
By the way, Enigmatic Drop Bear became a member of the channel. I'm like, hey man,
I like that icon.
Enigmatic Drop Bear. I'm a big fan of all of this. I love it. So, by the way, thank you for supporting the channel that way. Next week, not this week, but next week, we will have another member Zoom call, which I love. I love doing those. So come on down. If you're a member at a certain level, you can come talk to us. They're great. We have hours-long conversations with the entire membership. Well, not anyone who shows up. It's great. It's great fun. So thank you for that. So kids, how do you feel about bringing this show to an end? I only say that because, my God, I have so much work to do, and I have to meet my director tomorrow. And tomorrow night we are doing another Midnight Metal. I don't know, but I think this has been a very compelling conversation.
Yes, it's been a wonderful stream. And Tom, I feel like I spent the entire day with you, and I've been loving
a lot of it.
Yeah,
half the reason I'm off screen right now is like I'm half dying over here.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm like, we should go. And by the way, I'm like, I don't want. Look, man, if you didn't think this was as fucking metal as it should be, no, we're not. We don't have Chaosium here. We haven't done interviews, but I think this is. I like these conversations we have on Friday. I think they're worthwhile. But right now, there's 226 of you watching this.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who is in the chat and listening. We appreciate it, and we love having you here.
We do, and that's one of the things I love about the show. Like, yes, normally on these midnight shows, we bring people on, which is fine. But I think that we've had a very compelling conversation. By the way, Larry just became a member, so welcome, Larry.
Yes,
Larry. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Which is fantastic. But I think that that's what I like having. You never know what's going to be happening on the show. I don't know. So I want to thank you both, thank
you,
Tom. You guys make me look good, so thank you for that. I want to thank the moderators. Darren Seeley is here. The Richard is here. And by the way, if you haven't seen his He-Man artwork, it's amazing. He's done a fantastic job. So, and while she's been here, she's also been a moderator. So that's amazing.
Yes.
You multitask. So thank you for that. I don't know who else is here. I think I got everybody. I want to thank my Blue Wrench staff. They're amazing. And I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. And also, if you want to write a letter to us, free of charge, please go to the Burnettwork.net website, and you can write a letter to Midnight Metal or the Midnighter. Just put that in the subject heading. And, if you want to write a letter to keep it clean. But I'll pass it along to her. I won't even read it first. Just say, this is for, and I'll be like, look, as long as you don't, actually, I'm going to read it. Who are we kidding? But you can, I'll send it to her, and she'll get it if you want to write Tom or Andre or Dave Parker. If you want to write a letter, or even Dieter Bastian, everyone's favorite German, write it to the Burnettwork.net, and I'll pass it along. So, there you go, ladies and gents. So on that note, I want to say thank you to Tom from Midnight's Edge, and thank you to where can people find Tom? Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Tom Connors Jr. on Twitter. Otherwise, you can find me, of course, on Midnight's Edge and Midnight's Edge After Dark. All that info can be found around those areas there. Those are the best places to find me, of course. And yes, Midnight's Edge After Dark is a separate channel. Most people don't really realize that, but yeah.
Well, there
and you pop up there once in a while.
I do. I love streaming with Midnight's Edge. I always have fun. We always have great. I love the fact. I have to say, one of the great joys in my life is when Tom sends me a link, and I'm working or doing a show. I come off my show, and I'm like, oh, Tom sent me a link. And when I can do it, I just pop on. I'm like, I have no idea what you were talking about.
Sometimes I'll give you a heads up, but very rarely. I'll just
but that's what I love. It's like chat roulette. You hit the thing, you're like, oh, what are you talking about? And then I jump on, and you've got great guests, and it's so much fun I feel like I've been adopted twice in my life, my parents, and then by Midnight's Edge, and it's fantastic. So thank you for that, Tom.
Yeah, you'd have to run
I feel the same way.
Because we adopted you pretty hardcore.
You did.
Like Andre even offered you a job at one point.
I'll take it at this point.
Yeah.
Now, what? You're part of the Midnight's Edge crew. Where can people find you?
Right now, just the Burnettwork. If you want to reach out to me or contact me.
Yeah, that's a question I get often, by the way. Does she have a channel?
Yeah, the Burnettwork.net. Send letters to but keep them clean. I know you boys are fantasizing out there, and some of you girls too, so I don't judge. But just keep them clean. If you want to write I'll pass them along, but you must be nice.
Well, it's all part of my rock and roll fantasy. So.
Oh wow! Yeah. Wow. Hey now, ladies. I mean, one of my favorite things is streaming with Az is I just love saying ladies. Like, can't get enough. So
I love Az,
and I love hearing him say what. I can't. I need that. I gotta upgrade my. There's a lot of upgrading technology. I ordered some webcams today. Very excited about them. I'm moving stuff around. It's great. In a world. So, on that note, kids,
like herpes again. I keep introducing you to people.
Please do. I mean, I'll take it. You know, it's not the herpes; it's the getting there that's the fun part.
That's right. It's the fun part. Yes.
And you know now,
sharing is caring.
I've been lucky. I've actually avoided that particular ailment.
That's good.
Not something I really would like to have in my life, but I understand many people do. But I've been lucky I don't. So, on that note, on that very fine, fun, uplifting note,
yes.
I would say this: don't worry, most of you have herpes. It's fine. It's fine. Don't think lesser of yourselves.
Yes,
the real
be kind
question,
to one another.
Yeah, be kind to one another. And that doesn't mean you can't do good. So or like He-Man or not like He-Man. I would love to hear what people think. Put it in the comments below. Do the two of you have final statements for tonight?
Oh, just be kind to one another and listen to one another and, enjoy the community. Just enjoy the community.
Would you say that every person you meet has a story to tell?
I would say that, yes, that you have never heard. And all you have to do
is listen. That's exactly right. I think that's a default position people should be in. I appreciate, you know what, I really like the fact that you believe in that. I mean, I never thought about that before, but thank you for saying so. I appreciate that. Now, Tom, what about you, sir? Do you have a final thought?
Well, it's hard to follow that up, of course. I just have to echo that sentiment, and other than that, I love the community. I love the discussion. I love the difference of opinion. That's another thing. So it's not like I, have any issues with somebody who doesn't agree with me at all. I don't think that at all. I just don't like getting into arguments on other people's channels. So,
No, but I think, look, what I like is, look, for me, we all have different opinions, but what I want to do is have an environment where we can all present them.
And that's what we love to have over at Midnight's Edge as well. Yeah.
And people are respected. And I want to thank everybody for doing that. I want to thank the moderators for fostering that kind of an environment. And I love these two guests. Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for you guys, I'm like, wow, it's almost 7.
It's sunny
a.m.
out already.
Wow, I it's not here. I can go take a shower because I do, and then I'm gonna
Andre's
go to bed.
gonna kill me, but yeah.
Well, lady, gent, thank you for being here, and I will say, well, I would say live long and prosper or something. I have nothing profound to say. It's late. But I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. We will be back tomorrow night. I don't know what's going to happen, but something will. And on that note, have a better night. That's exactly right.